You ready? Okay. You ready? All right. Okay, I'd like to call our special Finance and Audit meeting for Wednesday, March 15th to order at 9 a.m. We have all members of our committee present. We have public comments, which have none. Beautiful. Member comments. I just want to, as a member, want to say thank you very much for having the meeting last Thursday without me in my absence. I was watching the meeting live, but quite honestly don't really remember a heck of a lot of it, so I had to re-watch the meeting again. It was a pleasure to spend 4 hours re-listening to it. But I took a lot of notes and made a lot of thoughts about today's special meeting, so I just want to say thank you, and I apologize for being ill. It wasn't COVID, so that was a very good positive. Anyone else have member comments? Nope. Okay, so then we're going to go on to Advanced McHenry County. So I listened to the presentations. I wrote a whole bunch of notes about what was said, and so I have a bunch of questions in addition to what y'all had asked. And then some thoughts and comments also. I kind of wanted to do Sage first. But
They, Mike
yes.
is online.
Mike is?
Yes.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Just because they were the oldest one. So that's kind of what I felt like, you know, this has been dragging on and on and on with them. So Mike, are you able to hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep. I can actually hear you pretty well.
No?
So Mike, one of the things I just wanted to clarify real quick. So in your proposal, I just want to make sure you currently have some type of when I'm going back from your old proposals, you have some type of matrix that you use in regard to whether a family/parent comes in with a client and you determine whether they are, I think you called them scholarship type clients, meaning that they're for free, or you base it on a sliding scale based on what they would actually pay from 0 to full payment. Is that correct?
That's correct, Dan.
Okay. So I guess one of the things we would like to, or I would like to see that at some point in time, what that matrix is, or what tool you use for that.
Okay.
Because part of I think for part of the reimbursement side of it, that's going to be important for our staff to be able to utilize for reimbursement purposes. Your grant request is for client number 21 and beyond. So you currently have a program for 20 of these clients that are on scholarship. Is that the best way to say it? They're on scholarship, or they're at zero cost? I don't know how you.
Yeah, they're receiving financial assistance. Yeah.
Okay, so so what you're asking for is for client number 21 on up. So
That's correct.
For our purposes in regard to reimbursement and how we have to validate the payout, and in return the auditing side of it, it's best to have, for student 21 and beyond, it's best to have that information so that we can validate that what we're paying out was done for clients that are in need, I guess is the best way to say it. I'm trying to make it as clean as possible so that the back end of this, reporting wise and auditing wise, it's clean.
Okay, and what information specifically will you need from number 21 and up?
So if we have the original matrix of what you use to determine upon entry of student 21, we use that, and we then look at, for student 21, we look at what you did in order to determine that need, and we compare that against what the scale is that you have already established. We agree with that, and then we can make the payout.
Okay, and I see my colleague Allie Greenman just joined, so she can jump in as well if she would like.
So we have to,
I'm so sorry. I thought we were a little bit later on the agenda, so I'm so sorry about that. If you could repeat the question, I'm happy to see if I can help.
so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make your reporting and our auditing of the program very succinct and clear. So the student that comes to you, student number 21 comes to you, and you have determined through your own matrix that they are eligible for a scholarship of some proportion in relation to your program. So if we have your original matrix, whatever you currently have in place, that you use as a sliding scale to determine their need, we can then take that normal matrix, look at what you use to justify that student number 21 has a need. We can compare that and say, yes, we agree with you that student number 21 has a need, and we can now reimburse based on that data and that information.
Okay, so are you looking to do approval for financial aid prior to us giving the financial aid for the camper? Is that something that you would like to do, or are you just saying after we give the financial aid at the end of the summer, you would want to verify that?
It's because it's a reimbursement program, it's after the fact. So we just have to, we have
You
to,
would just be auditing the percentages that we give based on the scale.
correct. So that, because that's our assurance that we have, that you guys did your job. What we said we were paying for, we're actually paying for.
Okay, I think my only question would be is that, we talked a little bit, I think, on the first presentation, is, of course, we take all the information into the account, family size, income, all that. A lot of the times we often award more based on extenuating circumstances, maybe a parent in the hospital, maybe that they're caring for, their own parent or something like that. So of course the scales is what we use as the base, but then we often give more based on, any story or any narrative that is shared, because sometimes the financials don't always show everything. Would that be something that would be acceptable to you as well, or would you want us to use solely on the scales?
Well, I don't want to lose your autonomy of being able to determine need. But we have to be able to validate that need somehow. So, and naturally this is an anonymous situation, so I don't want names, addresses, and all that stuff. Somehow you're gonna have to put an anonymous, either attach a number to them or something. But somehow we have to be able to validate what you have come up with. And I'm open to what that is, but I thought the matrix was, and I didn't realize that you kind of go off of that matrix as a baseline, but then maybe modify it slightly, but.
It's all dependent on what the kind of the narrative is, and so I would say the scales is our baseline. That's normally what we do, but a lot of times, a family's financial situation at that moment, because sometimes they do their tax return or whatever, is just not reflective of what's happening right there. And so I would say we never give less. It's just oftentimes maybe that they need a little bit more help. Maybe they just lost a job or getting back on their feet. And so as long as that, if we do go off of the scale, maybe we can just write a little sentence or whatever so that you're aware as to why we gave more. I think that sounds like that would hopefully be sufficient for you, but we wouldn't deviate that far off from the scale.
And that's fine. Again, I don't want to lose your autonomy of being able to run your program. I'm trying to make sure that our back-end auditing side of it doesn't get bogged down with a bunch of details. The other suggestion that I have that I think will make the committee's life easier and hopefully your life easier is establishing a per dollar amount per student. Because I think the committee had brought up last time several questions about the ability to get 100 students this summer. And again, I want you to be able to run your program with the ability to do it as much as you can. But if we reimburse, X dollars per student, then whether you get student 21 or 51 or 71 or 101, it's germane to a cost per student versus, we had to hire, 4 staff members or 5 staff members or 6 staff members or whatever it is. At that point, we are attaching a dollar amount per student, and it makes it more clean and less cumbersome, I guess. Is that something that would be of interest?
That certainly sounds a lot easier to do that in an amount per child that comes in. And so, honestly, I think whatever you prefer, we're fine to do. We would be thankful for the partnership and for the scholarship help. And so, either one is fine with me. I would say validating them at the end, I think, would probably be a lot of more work to review. And so if you wanted to do an amount per student, I also think that would be fantastic. And if there is further need beyond that, we would certainly be able to assist any campers that needed more help to be able to attend. So an amount per child sounds like that would be a lot simpler for both of us.
Okay, go ahead.
How many campers get assigned to each counselor?
And the question was how many campers for each counselor?
Yes.
We follow the American Camp Association ratios because we are an accredited camp, and so our ratios are by age group. So for ages, I do not have this in my brain right now, but for 6 to 8, we are in groups of 8. For 10 to 12, we're in groups of 12. Oh my gosh, I might have to email that to you. I don't know off the top of my head what the age groups are, and I'm sorry, we're going through accreditation right now. But our license exempt also, our standard is 2 to 30. So we try to break it down a little bit smaller for our campers just because we have a higher percentage of younger kids. I can grab my little binder right here. If there's another question, I can answer it too.
Teresa, in the application, they put 10 to 1.
10 to 1?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it looks like that might be an average of what she was
Yeah,
saying.
that was 10 to 1, good, yeah.
Yeah.
So my other question, which the supplemental information that you had provided didn't really address the concern that I had regarding sustainability. And the committee has always had an issue with sustainability of the program. So what I had read, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that after the 3rd year, that you would definitely continue the program, and that you would just have to fundraise in order to make sure that there is the available funds to have the program go forward. That doesn't give me personally or the committee that much assurance, in the sense that fundraising is a difficult proposition in and of itself. And I know that, you know, you're currently financed through donations from some very generous individuals and entities. What assurance can you give the committee / the county in relation to if donations do not come through for whatever reason, that you're willing to use program funds in order to support this program moving forward?
So there's a couple of things. So fundraising, of course, is one of them and is the big one, but I understand what you're saying. I hear the concern because obviously that's not guaranteed. There's a couple of other things. So I think the main thing would be our work with CCAP, which is the state subsidy. And so what we would do is we would continue to work with the families to see how we could further assist them. And so the state does give subsidy for parents that are working or going to school, and that is our main focus always, to try to get families in that program first before we give any sort of financial aid. Because of the pandemic and everything that has affected the parents so much, CCAP has been a huge resource for our families. And so we would work with families to see if we could get them on subsidized childcare, because then hopefully then they could stay with us throughout the school year and participate in other programs with us. And so that would be one thing that we would work on quite a bit to assist the families to continue to ensure that they had sustainable programming. So that would be option one for us. The other assurance I think I can give is that, you know, we are not turning children away for the inability to pay. And so if someone comes in and needs help, we would continue to help them. And so if there's, you know, need or anything else, we would figure out a way to work on that and to make sure that they had support to attend camp. And then, you know, Mike runs the local board and has support through there. And so he is very active in making sure that the kids have, you know, financial aid to be able to come to programs. So, you know, Mike would continue to work with his board to show that there's continued need and work with them to raise funds. So we would have the support from Katie, who's at the association level, and then Mike, who runs his own local board for fundraising. So we would have those three kind of big opportunities to continue that funding.
And Allie, I would just add one more thing. The local board here is the Foglia Foundation family, which is he's basically that family is the donor for both the Sage location and the Lake Zurich location. This location, though, because I don't know if you were on, I don't think you were on last week, but this location has gone through just a great uptick with Health Bridge closing at the end of 2022. We've had an uptick of about 500 memberships, you know, being added to the location. I just talked to Mr. Vogel last week about, I'm basically asking him, I said, we're going to have to spend some money now, I think, because we're going to have to expand some of our studio space and do some additions, because we have about double the traffic that we had, you know, just 120 days ago. And his soft spot has always been, and I'm not speaking on his behalf, and so we're not right to do that, but you know, I don't think sustainability is going to be an issue with the Foglia Foundation, you know, strength behind this location.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So that was all my questions that I had in regard to, you know, after watching the presentation. What does the committee think about the idea of doing a per student reimbursement versus trying to formulate through what they had submitted?
I really like it. It's clean.
Mm-hmm.
I think it works easier.
Right.
I came up with a grid, just a couple scenarios. So in their application, they said they had spent $18,464 for 34 scholarships for day camp last year, which would come out to $453 per child. So just taking that seemed a little bit low. And then when I looked at what they asked for, up on the top right, it says they asked for $3,446 per child if they were looking for 100 kids. And I thought that seemed a little high. So I kind of tried to make it clean. They said the camp counselor salary was $45,000, so if that's 100 kids, that would be $450. And then I added a 5% increase, because that's what they put in their ask. And then I just stuck a number in there, $550 for suggested commodities, which I guess those would be supplies. So if you add those together, that would be $1,000 per child. And then for each year, the salary portion would go up 5%. And then on the bottom in the square, you'll see that how much it would cost per year, depending on how many kids. So if we wanted to do, scale it up, or if we wanted just to say we were gonna do 100 kids every year. And we can change these numbers, I have it in here, it was just a starting point.
Well, we only really have 3 summers that they can do this as a reimbursement, because we're already in 23, and it has to be paid out by 26. So we got 23, 24, 25. So you got 3 years of.
We could do the end of 26, couldn't we? 23, 24, 25, 26 summer, so we'd have till December of 26.
I don't think we can squeeze that in the summer of 26, can we?
I thought it had, all the expenses had to be incurred by December.
Right, but it had to be paid out by 26, I believe.
Yes, I can follow up with Mike. When we get forward?
No, because I think that in the year of 26, I believe everything has to be done by the end of 25,
That's what I thought.
paid out in 26.
That was my understanding too.
Well, also just for our own use, like we want to use all of our funds by 25 so that we're using our funds and not having to give anything back to
Correct,
the federal government.
right.
So I concur with Chair Scala that it's only 3 summers.
Okay.
So I, thank you for putting this together, Kelly. So what I'm reading is it would be 1,000 per child then?
That's just what I estimated, we
Okay.
can change it, I just.
No, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on what you have
Yeah.
here. So if we were to propose 1,000 per child, either Ally or Mike, I don't care who answers this, but how does that fit into, based on what you had requested on the grant, which was significantly higher than that?
So the question, how would we make that work, or would it help us, or what?
We're trying to work with you to establish, everyone agrees that a per child amount is gonna be cleaner, easier, auditable, much easier, blah, blah, blah. So, what Kelly came up with, based on what you had submitted, it was over 3,000 per child, but based on your counselor and commodities, we're coming up with about 1,000 per child. So there's a variance of, over 2,000 per kid. So I'm trying to understand, what are we missing that validates that additional amount?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. So if we were able to have $1,000 per child and most campers come for 6 weeks, we would be able to provide, a scholarship against the camp amount to help for that. And so would that mean then there wouldn't be assistance for the additional staff? Would we want to do the entire gift for the financial aid for the campers?
Let me ask this a different way. Currently, I bring my child to you, I'm willing to pay full boat. What does that cost to me to be able to bring my child to this camp?
So just the regular cost for camp, right?
Yes.
It's $280 a week for members, or $340 a week for a non-member.
340 a week. And you said it's for 6 weeks?
That's for 1 week of camp, from Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. for 6 p.m.
Right, but you said the camp runs for 6 weeks.
this
We
process?
run for 10 weeks, but normally campers sign up for about 6 weeks, so that's the average time that one child would attend the camp.
It's 2040.
So 1 week of camp is $280 or $340.
Right.
Campers can sign up week by week because maybe they have grandma in town or they're going on vacation, but so we have flexible registration based on what the parents need, so you're not signing up for like a bundle of weeks. Parents can elect week by week.
So
See.
can I just make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I think part of this is we want something simple in terms of reimbursement, but they're having to account for the cost increase for their the trainers, the counselors, and that's an upfront cost, right? And so this, when we get a set price, it may or may not cover all their costs because that levels out over time if you get the program up and running. If you don't get as many kids coming in, then the cost per child is much higher because they've already had to invest in the counselors. And that gets back to your question about whether or not you get enough people who would take it. Are you going to, you asked the question, you're not currently turning people away. Are you going to get enough people to take advantage of this program to justify the increase in cost in counselors, which is an upfront cost? So I don't know how you get to that. We may be comfortable with it, but it may or may not meet what they need.
Is it possible, is it possible for us to kind of come in the middle? I really appreciate what Kelly did to kind of put this out for us and give us an indication. I appreciate the figure that was just provided of a high of 240 per week. So that's, if you take 240 times 6.
340.
It's a
340,
non-member.
excuse me, 340 per week times 6 basically is $2,040. So
Right.
that's kind of in the middle. Is it possible for us to come up with that $2,000 figure, put that in the middle? But then I agree exactly with what Carolyn is saying. There may be supplemental that is required in there for a variety of reasons that has to be considered. So is it possible for us to put in a flat rate of X supplemental dollars to assist in those unknowns, if you will, type of thing? So, and I'm just brainstorming here. Is it possible for us to say $2,000, excuse me, $2,000 per student plus $10,000 supplemental, or $20,000 supplemental, or $5,000 supplemental, or something like that? Not per student. I'm talking about in total.
Their spreadsheet shows bus services also, so the 340 is not including the bus services.
They
that
don't have a
plan-
bus service, I thought.
Well, they plan on putting it in according to this right here.
Well, I know, but they talked about that last Thursday, that they were, Mike had talked about the fact that they don't really have a bus service, that parents kind of, he works with parents to try and carpool kids and
Okay, so that's not
stuff.
part of it that we have to
No.
worry about. And the other thing is I have ARPA funds here obligated by 2024 and spent by 2026.
Right,
Spent by
Spent by
2026. So
2026.
right. So that's why I'm saying we can't do summer of '26.
Mhm.
Okay, why
Technically, you could. We're just saying.
December 31st, 2026?
You could technically, but it's what Teresa was saying seemed to me like we're not, just because we want to make sure it's all spent so that we're not getting to the end of 2026 and realizing, okay, well, you only used half of what we in 2026. But by then, they've already spent down a fair amount of it in
They
the
might
first
not
couple of
have
years.
though. That's my worry. My worry is that they'll get 20 kids this summer, maybe an additional 20 kids this summer. And maybe they'll get an additional 30 kids next summer, that I don't know if they can ever get to the additional 100 kids needing aid.
But that, see, to me,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that, but that's not my issue. My issue is let them try and expand the program as best as they can. I mean, obviously, we're talking about families that are in need.
Right.
And if they can find that many families in need, then God bless them, and I'm happy that those clients can get the services that they're offering. I mean, I agree with you. I think that's a stretch, and I think that's gonna be difficult to do, but if they're able to do it, then to me, that's great. I don't necessarily have an issue with it.
Yeah. So my concern is that we're gonna end up giving back money to the federal government. That money that could have been spent in the community is not spent because we committed money that we could not spend. And if we can see that now, if we can see that this money is not gonna be spent, committing it to one of the other projects that we're gonna end up having to either also reduce or say no to, it's lost money, is my concern.
So I guess how I would phrase this is that I don't believe they're gonna get 100 for this summer. But, so I agree with kind of what Brian was saying. I like the 2,000 number. I think it takes the 340 times 6 weeks, which is an average. That, I don't want to force people to have to be members of the program or of the entity in order to, you know, be a part of it. Because if you can pull somehow, some way people from Harvard or you know, I think, Mike, you had said most of the people are within 15 miles of the actual of Sage YMCA. You know, but if you can pull people outside of that, I don't necessarily want them to have another cost of becoming a member in order to be part of the program. So I'm willing to go with the 340 non-member price, multiply it times 6 weeks on average. If you have, you know, student 21 that's only going to be there 4 weeks, well then hopefully it balances out with student number 27 who's going to be there 10 weeks and you know, and call it a day. And I think what we can say is that, to me, if we put a 3-year window on it, we put the number at X, whatever that number is, times how many students over the 3 years. And to me, if they come back and say, hey, we were able to get all 100 kids, I am open to allowing them to come back and say, we've spent that $2,000 per kid because we were able to get more than what you had budgeted for us. And I would be happy to give them more money. I mean, we know that there's projects already that we have spent as far as in theoretical terms with entities that are going to end up coming back to the county because their projects either aren't as successful as they had hoped or there's problems with it. So there will be some amount of money left in this program that I think in 26 we're going to try and figure out how to spend. And I would much rather have them come back and say how successful this program really is and that they need an additional 50,000, 75, 100,000, whatever it is. And I know there'll be money there to be able to do that.
So I have a question for you guys at Sage. Like I said when I started talking before, in the narrative it says that you spent $18,464 for 34 scholarships, which came out to $543 per child. So I wanted, what is the actual cost to you when it comes to staffing and commodities and supplies per child that Sage incurs for day camp per week? Because I know you gave us how much you charge, but what is the cost? Do you know that?
We could get that and send it back to you, but our main costs are staffing, program supplies, and then obviously, you know, the facility costs and that kind of overhead of the building. But then, you know, the staff is our main cost that takes up the expense because of our ratios and obviously the care of the children, and then the children go on field trips, and we have snack and things like that. And so we can get that exact breakdown for you, like a cost per child, if that would be helpful information. We could ask the finance team to be able to put that together and send it to you, if that would be helpful instead of the generic budget.
Just because the reason I ask is that 543 per child, you know, that in the narrative you wrote 18,464. Just wondering how you came up with that number.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing. In the narrative, he said that there's what amount?
18,464. I'm trying to find it.
Which one, in the supplemental or the main?
While she's looking for that, go ahead, Brian.
My concern is that we're trying to get into a little bit too much of their program budgeting, and I really think that that's their responsibility. I think the determination of the level of scholarship variance for an individual student is their responsibility. I think that what we can do is to say we are willing, out of our funds, to be able to support this program at X amount of level. And I think you're right, Chair. I think that we need to try to keep it as simple for auditing purposes as we can possibly do. So I think we just need to derive that figure. And again, I'm going to repeat, I'm comfortable with the $2,000 figure, plus I think that we should come up with a supplemental figure for some degree of flexibility with overreach costs that, again, is their job to determine how they need based upon individual or special needs of particular students. So I think that we need to, frankly, keep it up here just a little bit higher instead of going here in the weeds, because I think that's their responsibility to get into the weeds on this.
So my question is, how do you determine the number of students? Because, you know, like we've talked about.
I think that's a great question, and I think that that's what Kelly tried to do in her very appropriate scenario one here, which I thought was a great idea. And I think that we just need to come up with what we think might be a scale and then come up with the total funds on that. And my suggestion is, it's crazy, but 60, 80, 100. That's just for 3 years.
So I was doing math. So can we, let me start first. Can we agree that 2,000 would be an acceptable number per client, per student? Is that an okay?
I'll agree. I think it's probably high because they're not giving full scholarships to anybody. But I'll agree to 2,000.
Okay.
It's very generous.
Right, I don't think they are giving full scholarships to anybody.
Well, but that's what this program's supposed to be doing. That's what they're.
That's not, I thought I read that they're gonna give $125 per week per kid in
No.
their narrative.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but my understanding is that what you're asking for is for students that are full compensated people. Is that true?
So with this, with the award, that would not cover the entire cost of camp. So it would be a partial scholarship. But like we were discussing, I anticipate that it would be a combination of, some of this scholarship and then probably some additional YMCA scholarship for anyone that needed 100%. But I believe that $125 a week is what we would be able to do with the award that we would give, because the cost of camp is $340 a week for non-members, and then with the app that we had, it would be $125 per week for, I believe, the 10 weeks that the camp runs. So if we did less, then we could give more. And then again, like you mentioned, if someone comes for 4 weeks, and then we can give the rest to someone else. So it would not be a full scholarship unless, obviously, then the need is higher than what they were receiving. Then we would give them more. So yeah, it would be a partial scholarship to be able to attend.
So Allie, I guess I'm a little confused by that answer, because what we're saying is that if we're willing to give you $340 a week times an average of 6 weeks, which is just over $2,000, so we're saying we're willing to give you $2,000 per student. That is
correct. So sorry. The initial application, I think, was what was just mentioned, but now that we're shifting to the $340 for the 6 weeks, then yes, it would be, we would give them camp at no cost. You're correct. I'm sorry. I believe the initial application, that was what the ask was for the 10 weeks. But now, if that is the award, then of course, if you're covering the $340 per week for the children, then we would give them no cost. Sorry for the confusion. I just wanted to make sure that we were clarifying what was in the application. I think is now shifted to what we were talking about.
okay, but I just want to be clear. It's you're providing that at no cost to the parents because the parents qualify for no cost based on your matrix that you use. So I just want to be very clear about the expectation of what we have versus what we're talking about.
So
So if you determine that there is no cost then we would give no cost. Yes, that's correct.
So,
I just want to be very clear about this, because to me, this is a key component of what your ask is. So if you have student 21 that comes into your facility, they are providing the data that you require right now to show need. And when that family shows need that they would get full supplemental of, in this case, $340 per week, we're coming back, kicking that in and saying, nope, we will cover that $340 so that Sage is theoretically whole still, and the county ARPA is picking up that difference.
Right.
Okay,
can I just make an observation on that one?
yeah.
So, in some sense, in order to simplify this for us, we're kind of changing their business model. Because
Right.
if we take somebody who can, okay, so now they get the whole thing for nothing, when they could have afforded 50%, now you could have had two families who could have afforded 50%, now you're serving two families, but we said, no, you're gonna get the whole ride because you're gonna be number 21. So we're changing kind of how they approach this. And I'm not, because sometimes I feel a little uncomfortable because we don't know all the dynamics that go into, what went into this in the first place. And so, I don't know.
I guess I'm not understanding because
Well, if you're basing your award, we're gonna give you enough money to cover camp for free for 6 weeks, right? And that's gonna cover number 21, 22, 23, 20, each student that comes in, or camper that comes in. But their business model isn't based on, we're gonna give you a full ride just because you express need. What they provide to that family is based on their ability to pay.
correct.
Which could be some or none.
And I'm not disagreeing with that, and that's my point. My point is that when a family walks in to their facility, they still have to go through their personal process to determine need.
But then how do we reimburse them for what they think the person can pay for 50%? How then, if you're basing your model on, we're gonna pay you this much per camper, then what happens to that person who can pay part of it?
Up to?
Well, so that's my point. My point is that their request originally generated because they see a need for families that can't afford, meaning would get full ride scholarships, that are not being met right now. And so they're saying they want to go out into the community and get those clients into their facility to get them to camp. And so that's their ask. That their ask is to try and have us supplement for those families that can't afford to do anything.
That's not their ask.
Well, I guess the thing
Their
is,
ask is based on $125 average.
Right.
The $125 average times 100 kids is 500,000, 4 years. And then they added the counselors on top of that, and it comes to 680.
So am I not understanding the program then?
right,
I don't know, Mike.
Well, obviously I'm not, which is fine.
I don't think they're gonna get, if they go out into the community, they're not gonna get an extra 100 kids that everyone needs 100%.
Right.
Okay,
That's right.
They have an average here of 125. I think they feel that average will continue through the next 80 or 100 kids.
okay.
So they're basing on $125 a student. The narrative changes a little bit depending on how many people you think you can get. If you only get 60, you get 60 of them, I think it comes to 75,000. I don't have my calculator in front of me, but then you are eliminating 4 counselors. So then the money for the counselors drops down to, for example, 60 the first year. I believe it's 60 times, it'd be 75,000 for the kids and 27 for counselors. So you're looking at 102,000 for the first year, based on 60 kids.
Right.
Because I do think that they feel that the scenario ratio is gonna come through for the need of what the kids are gonna be, even all the way up. And no matter where they go and advertise this program.
Okay. So I'm completely wrong. I apologize. So where do we want to go then?
I think maybe, so give them the $125 per kid plus $90 for the counselor. per kid. So, they're not, but I'm changing it. This is-
I'm open to whatever you
Right.
guys,
So in theory, if each counselor would be $45 per kid per week, and I'm saying, since we're only saying they're really gonna probably do 6 weeks, the $45 per kid is too small for the counselor, so I'm saying, fine, I'll double it, I'll give them $90 per week per counselor per kid, and then the $125 per week per kid, which is $215 per week. Times however many kids you think they can do each. So, then we want to times 6, sorry. Still doing the math.
so that's just under
1290.
1,300.
It's just under 1,300, yeah.
Are you basing it off of this thing, or are you basing it off of what I'm kinda lost to.
I based the $125 per week per kid.
On what they're saying here.
Yes, then I said, I doubled what they want per week per counselor to be,
To cover some commodities and
Right,
other
yeah.
stuff.
Where's the figure for the counselor?
they
Not on that
don't, it's
sheet.
Kelly's figure. Kelly's figure says 10 new counselors is $45,000. And then that's dividing, if you divide that for 10 weeks, that's $450 per week. And then in theory, it's 10 kids per counselor, so it's $45 per kid per week.
I followed your math, so I was at 1,300 a kid.
Yeah. And so that's my answer, 1,300 a kid.
Okay, so, and then so then they could still use the process that they have with their sliding scale matrix.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever that process is, we would get that data and information still to validate and per 21 above.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the validation that we would need for auditing purposes. But we would have a set amount of, in your scenario, 1,300 per student, and we'd still need to figure out, based on an award, how many students for each of the 3 years, but, you know.
But so that's allowing them flexibility to, in terms of what they actually provide in terms of the award to the actual families?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you base it on a per child basis then?
Well,
They pick 125.
yeah,
They're the ones that pick 125.
That was 120,
5 per week.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
I'm a little bit confused. Are we trying to say that we will give them ultimately, out of the funds that are available to us, ultimately a maximum number of dollars? Or are we trying to say that every year we'll cover their need for the supplemental for those students that can't afford this? Which are we trying to do?
We're trying to do the first scenario. We're trying to give them an award of X dollar amount that we believe will cover their 3 years
Right.
of students.
Well, this is my concern. I think we're getting way, way, way too far into how they're distributing their monies. I think we just need to come to a practical bottom line figure that we can use. And I really appreciate all the discussion because I think that it helps us to identify specific types of criteria that we understand are the variables in this process. The first variable is the amount of what that full ride scholarship might be. Understanding, secondly, that not everybody, as Larry pointed out, is going to need that full ride scholarship, right? The third thing is that we know that there's a variable with regards to weeks. Are they going to be there for 3 weeks? Are they going to be there 6 weeks? They're going to be there 10 weeks. The average is 6 weeks. We know that variable. The other variable that we have is the fact that they are obviously going to have to look at the number of students that they have in any particular year of participation, whether that's 60 the first year, 80 the second year, 100 the last year, we don't know. Nobody understands any of that, right? So we just have to come to our own formula, I think, based upon this information that they provided that's going to give us a bottom line figure that we can work with. I think we've kind of started to gel in that regard because I think everybody's already started to kind of come to some semi-agreement here in our minds about what's going to be flexible without changing their business model, because we're gonna give the dollars. They're gonna continue to do what they want to with the business model. That's their decision. That's not our decision. So my thought is, if we can come together on that $2,000 per student, because that's an average of 6 weeks, which is already the fact that's been kind of provided, an average there, average of 6 weeks. We know what that cost is if they do the whole thing. Now, I'm gonna come back to that, Larry, okay?
Okay.
Because not everybody's gonna need $340, right? But if we take that, 340 times the 6 weeks, that's $2,000, right? If we consider that they're gonna have a 60, 80, 100 model, because they're gonna try to grow the program, 60, 80, 100 students per year, that's still gonna be an average of 80 students per 3 years, right? That's 240 students. You multiply that out, and you basically come up with $480,000, right? $480,000, plus a supplemental, because I do think that there's some variation here that cannot necessarily just be covered because some students don't need the whole amount. I think that there's a little flex that's going to be there. So I added $20,000 to that. That's $500,000. $500,000, all right? Now, you got to back that off for Larry's point, which I absolutely agree. Not everybody's going to have the full ride scholarship. So back that off by a percentage. Let's say that it's, 75% of the 500,000, because we're backing it off because some people can pay the full ride. So take that $300,000 or that $500,000 multiplied by whatever percentage you think that we need to do. 75%, $300,000. And then they can report against the number of students that they have.
But again, the only problem I have with that is we're going to a per student, and you can't discount
Right.
off a per student.
Right,
So
yeah.
you just, you choose a student number, whatever the
Okay.
heck that is, and you don't worry about the discount.
It's,
You
the
just-
math is the math is the math is the math. Whether we take that 75% off, or we take that 25% off at the first,
Sure, then
we
you'd have to
take
do
it off
that.
per student.
Yep, that's fine. But, go ahead.
Yeah, what I worry about is paying for overhead. It seems that 340, when we asked what was included in that, they did talk about overhead, and I'm not sure that this is something we should be paying for. We should be paying for the students' costs, supplies, and the salaries directly related, not the overhead at the Y. So,
I'm okay with the 1,300 that Teresa came up with.
yeah,
I'm fine with that.
so that, tell me that again, it's 125 a week for the,
$125 a week per kid
for the,
for the camp, because that's the scholarship they give.
okay,
And then $90 per, the average, $90 for the 6 weeks. $90 per 6 weeks is $540.
$90 would be the.
So when they
Salaries.
wanted their salaries, yeah, because we originally I balked at paying for new salaries at all. But the committee has made the argument that we need to cover some of the salary costs too, because this is for kids who are needed, so they're not paying their full cost. So the $90 to cover what could be salaries and then extra commodities. As Mike said, I like that. The $90 covers their salary portion of what they need to pay for new counselors, and it pays for their commodities. And the thing is, it makes it easy for reimbursement. So when we talk about there has to be a reimbursable amount that makes it obvious what you're reimbursing for. So if you just say $90 for your counselors and commodities, and $125 because that's the scholarship they give.
Okay, so that's, if you take that times 240 students, that's $312,000.
May I ask a procedural question? Are we making motions and then
Nope.
having these things?
We're just
move?
having a
We're just-
discussion.
No,
And
no,
then-
but, no. The whole deal today. We're wanting to pass things on to the committee of the whole or not,
Yes.
right? And in order to do that, we are going to vote on each of these to pass them on to the committee of the whole
Eventually, at the end, yes.
at the end after we've gone through all four.
Yes.
Okay, because we have spent an hour on this, and I'm not interested in their budget anymore. I agree with the total amount. We're gonna have to work out the audit process anyway. We're just talking about whether we're gonna pass this on with the recommendation of the amount. So,
So, can we agree on the $1,300 amount then?
Times 240, $312,000.
the total.
Yeah. Is that okay? Does anyone have concerns with that?
That's 1,300 per child, right?
Yes.
Total,
Yes.
for the summer, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
With the idea that they can always come back in year 2 or 3, there would still be ARPA funds there that can be spent, correct?
Yes.
Because I personally think that's a touch low, but I can.
But if they can get the program booming and they already went through that, then I would be tickled pink if they came back and said, hey, we need some more.
Especially because if they come back, because they did estimate increases in their salary budget, 5% every
Right.
year, so, yeah.
And you figured that based on average of how many? 60? 70?
80.
80
Yeah,
per,
so
per
it's-
year?
Yeah, I did 60 and 100 if they grow the program. It's the same thing as 80, 80.
Okay, so
Right.
times 240,
Right.
240 children
Times
over 3
32.
years.
Right. 312.
All right, did you guys understand what we did here? Did you follow all that? If not, I'll recap it for you. So what we're saying,
If you could do a summary, that would be fantastic.
sure. So what we're saying is that for student 21 and beyond, we're going to reimburse at $300 per child, $1,300. And for the award purpose, we're going to calculate that for the next 3 years based on 240 children. So that total award would end up being $312,000. If you guys have an extremely successful program, which we hope you do, and you have gone through the $312,000 before the end of the 3 years, then you can come back to us and we will increase that award. We'll make a modification to the resolution to increase the award by, you know, in essence, it's not going to be more than $390,000.
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah, sure.
So remember that the funds have to be obligated by the end of '24, so after that, they cannot request additional. And then we just got confirmation from Bronner that they need to be incurred and expended by the end of '26. So I think the summer of '26 could be included.
Could be included? Okay. All right. This is why I'm not an expert. I just pretend to be one on TV.
But either way, the point being, they need to come back to us next year,
Well,
not
what's the
2
math
years
behind the
from now.
1,300, that's what I missed.
Well, you said the end of '24?
Yes, so I guess they would have.
They would have this summer and next summer to come back to us. I mean, I'm okay if we want to increase this and just, you know, if it works. I agree with Teresa that the worst case scenario is that they don't use all the funds, but, you know,
He had a question, Mike had a
We
question.
got good hard numbers if they come back at the end of '24.
I would agree.
I
That's fine.
agree. I think that we can keep revisiting this over and over and over and over again. I think we've got a pretty good, solid approach here.
Okay.
And I do acknowledge that they have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
What was the calculation to get to the 1,300? I missed that part when we were on the 2004.
1,300 per child, 240 children over 3 years.
Yeah, I get that. What's the math behind the 1,300?
Teresa, go ahead. Matt, you can do your
Alright,
math.
so you had said in your proposal that this is the mark over there.
There's a mic over there.
Alright, you had said that you're generally giving $125 per kid per week for your scholarship, and then so that's $125 per kid. And then your request for salaries for additional counselors, the math was done by my colleague Kelly Wegner, that it's $45,000 for 10 new counselors, so that's $4,500 per counselor per summer, which is $450 per week, divided by 10 kids is $45. So we added $90 per kid to cover the costs of counselor and commodities. So $90 plus $125 was $215. $215 times 80 kids times 6 weeks for 3 years gets you to $312,000.
Do we want to add that fourth year, though?
We could add the fourth year, sure.
Another 80.
Do you want to add?
I wouldn't.
I'm fine with that if that's what you want to do.
Sure.
So what's 1,300 times 80? So let's just do
80.
1,300 times 100, just for that last year.
Because we're doing 60, 80, 100, then 100.
So that'd be 130. So that would be 442.
I don't know if they can hear.
Well, I'm just,
Well, you're saying, yeah, it's two. So
I'm
it's
just adding
240,
another-
It's 340 students.
Yeah, 442,000 total.
Right.
we're gonna add in money for the year 2026 also. Because we were told by staff that we could still do that. So we're gonna add an additional 130,000 for 26. So that would bring the total to 442,000
For 4 years.
for 4 years.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. That is fantastic news. Thank you.
All right. Anything else on Sage? Nope. All right. Beautiful. We have an idea on that one. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you so much.
All right. Can we go in reverse order? Just fairness because the last one had to sit through the whole thing last
Yes.
time. Okay. So we're gonna do options and advocacy next. See how fair I am? You had to sit through the whole thing last time, so you get to go first this time.
First
Well,
is.
second.
Well, second, but Sage been here
That's right. Many months.
3 times, so.
No, that's perfect, because you're putting mine right there.
Yeah,
So you're
take a
perfect.
seat. Okay. So, I listened to your presentation, and I didn't really have that many questions. You did a great job in your write-up and your presentation and everything. My only question / thought process is, you had talked about, the first year was going to be the most difficult because it's a brand new program for you and you had to start it up. So, and then once you got that kind of going, you were hoping through your reimbursements, through depending on which funding stream it was, that you could then kind of get that program to be self-supporting. So when your proposal kind of ramped down the costs associated with that. So kind of going to what committee members have already talked about, we want to make sure we utilize all the funds and don't have a problem with, funds left over that we're having to give back to the government, because we sure in heck don't want to do that. So my concern is just a little bit, and I know this is kind of convoluted, but my concern is that the program is as successful as we all hope it will be, and that you're getting a cash flow that's better than what you had even anticipated. And how do we as a committee, if now we're being told that it has to be allocated by the end of 2024, which in essence give you 2 years to kind of see how things are going, how do we kind of work through that?
Yeah, great question. And because we are already operating on an array of different grants, we are very good at monitoring our operations and watching those dollars and really ensuring that we do spend down to the very best of our ability always. One thing that in listening to all of you, I see the challenge that you're facing in regards to each of these unique applications and your reporting system so that you feel like you have a handle on your accountability. This is something that we are very familiar with and capable of doing, and so what it sounds like is we really just need to set up a structure with this committee, with the board, so that we can demonstrate to you guys on a regular basis as to kind of where we're at in our spending and how successful we're being, where our challenges lie. And something I would maybe put out there to you is in every grant scenario, whether that is DHS, ISBE, MHB, community foundation dollars, you know, there are opportunities, right, for not just reporting, but to come to the committee and say, hey, we've realized, because these are all projections, of course, right, to the very best of our ability, we've thought long and hard about how do we get this to happen, what do we need to make that happen, how do we become sustainable, but we could also come back and say, hey, you know what, we have realized that this cost is actually more, right, and so we are overspending in this category, whereas in this other category we are underspending, right? And so opportunities to communicate that with all of you and look at our application to ensure that we spend those funds down and maybe amend, right? And so that is something that you might want to discuss as a committee as well as in regards to any of these applications, but that is something that would be a common practice with any of our grant funders to have those kinds of things in place. So I think that the way it is set up, we can be successful with it. If anything, we have we've probably underestimated some of those costs because we didn't want to take advantage of the opportunity either. You guys have a lot of applications in front of you, I can only imagine, and don't envy that. Where we put most of our dollars is in that recruitment and salary to attract the appropriate providers to provide the service, right? And then through our cost allocation plan that we already have established at our agency, we look at those other pieces of operation that are absolutely necessary in order to make something like this happen, right? But within reason, in the scope of what other grant funds do we already have available and who is pouring into things like occupancy and things of that nature, right? So I think we could set up a really good reporting system for you guys so that you have a real handle on how are we doing. And some of our funders, we report monthly, others report quarterly, annually for sure. You know, and I would encourage you guys to do the same. You know, we'd be happy to help put that structure in place with you. I don't know if that answers your question exactly.
Well, no, it did, and so I think we, through staff, you know, that, yes, there's a reporting system, and part of that is just through the reimbursement process that we have to go through and the auditing process that we have to go through. And so, you know, that there's always going to be a monitoring that's going to be occurring on each of the grants to understand what's being spent, what's not being spent. And again, it's just so that we're not leaving money that is not being spent, you know. So as long as you're open and willing to be a part of that, you know, because naturally if things are successful and you're getting that cash flow that you need, and you come back and say, hey, you know, just short of 1.3 million, hey, we think we're going to really end up needing $1 million total, then we want to be able to come back and utilize that other 300,000 to something
for others
else.
in the community.
Right.
Absolutely. I think that the reporting system would allow you to track and see where that's at for you. And again, every funder is unique and something that maybe has to be decided here, but sometimes that means that, you know, that allocation is reassessed at that year marker, which sounds like probably a good place for all of these applications, right? To look at, you know, what have we spent down, who have been successful with that. And I can tell you, we don't trend at our agency to have to give dollars back, truly. If anything, we exceed our grants and have to fundraise and do other activities in order to make our ends actually meet, because they're not fully going to support all of our operations ever, any one of those grants. So
Okay.
I think we'll be successful spending, is what I can tell you. Especially in that first year. We did taper it down for the idea that we hope to be bringing in something every year a little bit more, right?
Right. Okay.
And there are some items on there that would be a one-time cost, right? So we wouldn't expect to have that in that second year.
Did you have a question?
Yep.
Yep, go ahead.
How do we handle the year 2026 on this one? If they come in at the year end with looking for a reimbursement? We're too late, essentially.
And listening to all of you, can I refer to you and what you said? I think it has to be obligated by a certain date, but we have through the end of 26 to actually spend it.
Incur.
So I don't think,
Obligated by the December of 24.
right?
I think we have to spend it by 2026, which
Yeah.
means
And
they
don't.
have to be reimbursed by the end of 2026.
We have to
Yes.
have the bills in the system in order to be paid.
Yes.
But in essence, that's one and the same because we flip around the bills pretty quickly, so.
And
But,
then-
yes.
Yeah, and I think that's common practice too with any of our grants, and that you would give us a deadline as to like that reporting piece at the very end. And if you look at that last year,
It's 85.
we tapered it down quite a bit. I am sure costs will exceed 80,000.
You might get to that very early in the year, we pay you off, we're done.
Yeah, exactly. I can
So,
see
and I
that.
listened to you, I wasn't here a lot
Yeah.
that day, but, so you were very thorough, but yeah, but I think, to
Okay.
your point, I think we would end up paying them
Right.
early in
I just
the
didn't
year.
want to, yeah, see them come in with the year-end
Yeah.
budget and the bill on December 31st, and then all of a
Right.
sudden, we got a snafu.
No.
Yeah.
Correct,
Yeah.
Can I ask a question too? So, and I'm hearing the reimbursement language being utilized. So in order for us to hire those providers to support the program, would we be asking for reimbursement upon their hire? Or are those dollars that you would provide up front so that we can,
They have to be reimbursable.
they have to be reimbursed?
So when you outlay money, we're
Mhm.
gonna come back and backfill that money with you.
So we would want to report that monthly then, please.
As soon as you spend it, you report it, you get it sent to you.
I'm going to
Right,
report it
right.
immediately.
That's every carrier's thing.
And reporting monthly.
So they're gonna be reporting all the
That's
time.
if that's the case.
Yeah. And the reason why we set that up is because we never wanna be left with, we gave you money, it didn't end up getting spent where it was supposed to,
Right.
or how it was supposed to, and now we got an audit
We
issue.
have to pay it back and that kind of thing.
Correct.
I can appreciate that idea, so long as it can come in timely.
We're not like some other entities. and-
Because, yeah, it's in a position.
Yes, no, we're
Not
so
too-
again, and that's why I keep on harping on the reporting side and the auditing side, because the cleaner we can make that, the process, our internal process of, the bills get received, it goes through our internal auditor, it gets approved there, it comes back, and the checks get cut. So the cleaner I can make that process, the quicker you can get your money. If it's a super clean process, you can get your money in 2 weeks from the time you bill us. So it's, yeah. Well,
Public record. Okay.
I'm serious. I mean,
Yeah, I appreciate
I'm not
that.
saying anything that's not true. It's the cleaner we
Yeah.
can make it, the easier it is for our internal department to be able to go through all the approvals of our D365 software in order for the check to get cut. I mean, it's not a problem of not having money, it's making sure that it all gets audited and tied properly.
That's fine, as long as we can put a good system in place, I think that works then. Yep,
That's key.
perfect.
Anything else on this one? No? Oh,
Just,
go ahead.
so the number of clients, 60, is that per year? It says here, served in year 1, 60.
I think that was just a year one goal, honestly, because we know that first year, some of that will be spent creating some of the structures and hiring and paneling with insurance companies and whatnot, but we don't want to neglect to serve during that first year either. That is just an initial goal post. I think that number will continue to grow over time.
Do you have an estimate that it would be over 4 years maybe? Or even,
The 60, you mean?
yeah, do you anticipate doubling?
Oh. Well, what's trend in our other programs is yes, those numbers do double. I think that, I don't know that I can promise doubling those numbers every year, because that would also then depend on maintaining staff and everything families, right? So I think the need exists, yes. But that will also depend on choice too. So how's that? You know, I think as an agency, we're pretty committed to always letting families know what all of their opportunities are in the community, and so then they choose to be with us, then we would bring them.
Anything else? Okay, thank you so much, appreciate it.
You guys.
Thank you.
All right, next is Ailes Foundation. See, that one only took
Brian is on the
10
phone.
minutes. Okay,
Or
Brian's on the phone, that's fine.
online.
All right, and Garrett's here.
And I'm here.
Okay, so going through this one, a couple of things. So Garrett, on this specific building, is the city contributing any money towards the completion, which Brian had said was roughly about $25 million?
We've not yet negotiated exactly what that looks like yet. The answer is definitely yes. There's going to be
Okay.
two main funds. Enterprise zone is going to be in place, so that can be used for, you know, really it's a discount on the building materials, roughly 2 to 3% of the project. It's not going to be a large percentage.
Right.
But with this project, with this particular building, TIF, which is our other main contributing, incentive, is going to be much, much less than it might have been. So you were digging into the numbers a minute ago. Do you mind if I dig into the numbers with you for a second on TIF, on how?
I know how TIFs work, so, but go ahead.
So in general, TIFs, whatever property value can go up, that increased amount is captured into the TIF, and then we can create a reimbursement back to there based on, really it's based on the amount that the property value can go up, or the taxable value of the property, right?
Right.
So imagine, just for painting a scenario, imagine a single-family home. Let's make the numbers really easy. If you bought it for $300,000, the assessed value is going to be $100,000 times approximately 10% tax rate. You're going to have about $10,000 tax bill every year, roughly, right?
Yep.
The way these apartments are going to be done. So in general, what apartments are going to do in McHenry County, the way that our assessment works here, is rather than assessing it by the actual construction value of the apartment, the assessor here will put approximately a per unit value of the target of how much money they want that building to pay per unit, rather than on the construction value. And that one, for example, is in the neighborhood of, for a brand new market rate apartment, very, very easy example is the Woodstock Square apartments that were just built in downtown Woodstock. Those cost $5.5 million to build. Assessed value I know is $800,000. Divide that by the 30 units, 2,600 times the 10% tax rate, $2,600. Right? If it was 5 million, 5.5 million, 5 million, not 50 million. Too many zeros on there.
We can talk to Bob Ross
By
if you
three.
want about how to do the assessment on these.
Anyway, the point is, it would be much, much higher.
Correct.
So let's look at this building, for example. 25 million is the approximate cost. Does that sound right?
That's what Brian had said.
Yeah, Brian said 25 million.
Yeah.
So, divide that by 3, the assessed value should be in the neighborhood of 8 million. But if you're doing, and this is where it comes in, the downtown Woodstock Square apartments, the assessed value was in the neighborhood of 2,500, 2,600. For an affordable unit like this, that assessed value, we already know from Bob Ross that it's going to be in the neighborhood of 1,800, maybe 2,000. Is the target for how much is going to be paid in taxes per unit, right? So rather than having an assessed value that's going to result in a TIF value of several $100,000 every year, we're talking 70 units times $1,800. That's going to be the net. We're talking $126,000 is all every year,
Right.
rather than in the neighborhood of $500,000, which is what it would have been if it was assessed on the actual construction value of the building.
But I don't think Brian would want to pay I mean, Brian's also paying that
That's a
money,
benefit
so,
there, but what
yeah.
I'm saying is, we don't have in the TIF for this particular building, the revenue to be supporting this building with a lot of TIF.
No, unless you
Because of
bond,
the way
unless you
that
bond
it's-
against the TIF to give
Because
him
of the way
more
it's
money.
taxed. Well,
Yeah.
even though 126.
But you have to have a cash flow to be able to pay back the bonds.
Yeah,
I get it.
With a revenue of 126, we just don't have it there to support a large TIF incentive on this particular
Okay.
property. That's my long answer to a short question, sorry.
Which was fine. The other question is more for Brian, and again, as you've been listening, hopefully, the process by which the reimbursement happens. So your level of expectation about when that reimbursement would happen on this project, is it upon the completion and occupancy of the building? Or that wasn't discussed at all, so how does that look to you?
It wasn't, and I think this is just more for a flow of funds. So we would have a preference, because it's financially better for us, but there is no set time. We just need to know as we process for our financial capacity. So there's generally 2 times when this money comes in, or money like this, that it will flow, if it's city or county money. And a lot falls on how you want it to happen. So one trigger can be certificate of occupancy. So when we're done, it's a one lump sum that comes in, here it is. The other option, and it would be our preference due to our sensitive interest rate environment and everything else, could be a reimbursement of costs through our draw process as soon as we allocate those costs associated, which just you said you have the ability to reimburse that. So I asked the question is if there is a preference from the county. You know mine, just because our cost of funds are very high right now when it comes to, but those would be the 2 that would become easiest, I think, to set for. Either reimbursement through the draw process as soon as we close and provide proof that we spent it, or certificate of occupancy.
Well, from the county perspective, it would be cleanest on certificate of occupancy because naturally we know the project is complete then, and we're not left hanging with a project for whatever reason doesn't get completed, and that's an issue for us.
So anytime we have a grant when it comes to, for example, a federal home loan bank grant or a city grant with LMI, 9 out of 10 times that's when it happens as certificate of occupancy. With these ARPA funds or like this on other projects, for example, I have a project in the city of Madison, Wisconsin we are doing. They are hard hitting us to hit those funds as soon as we have the ability to, because they want them out the door to check the box. So each case is different, and our preference would be as soon as possible because of our cost of funds. But certificate of occupancy, I completely appreciate what you're saying, and that is a general rule of thumb, which is used a lot of times.
Okay. Does committee
We
have,
can make one.
okay, does committee have any feelings on, go ahead.
Will that certificate of occupancy be ready before 2026?
Yeah, because he said he wanted to
Yeah.
open in December of '24.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, our hope is to start this fall. Worst case scenario, it's spring of 24, and we're probably a 12 to 14 month there. So I mean, is it a guarantee? No, but there has to be a lot of bad things that happen in this world for us to not meet that goal. And I will tell you, I mean, in the history of myself and my group doing this with, one of the people I work with has done this for 40 years, we've never had an issue where we've gone that long. So
Okay.
I don't anticipate that being an issue.
Okay, the only other comment that I had, and I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this correctly, but so this project what you called was a low-income senior housing, which is 55 and over affordable housing project.
Correct.
A lot of other terminology I kind of threw in there. So is the anticipation that this project, because it's for 55 and over age restricted, that the individuals that would be applying and getting housing here are because they're not necessarily out in the workforce, that they have perhaps some special needs or you know, are
I think I know where you're going, and if not, I can answer, you can finish. But there is no, this is independent living. This is not a supportive housing. So all of these individuals will have to be able to function, survive on their own. There is no care that is provided, nothing from that standpoint. The majority, if not all, of our residents in this building will have all been individuals that have worked full-time jobs in the past, primarily own their own homes, obviously have, you know, car, everything else, but just now on a fixed income. And one of the things, and not to sidetrack, but we talked about it last, and one of the important parts of this building is McHenry County has very high income limits relative to the area. So, you know, two individuals, maybe $50-something thousand qualify for living in this housing. There's just not enough units. There's a very low level unit, and then there's, you know, as you get in, and there's just not housing that really fits this need. So they will, this is purely independent living. There's an age restriction and an income restriction to it, but purely independent living. No supportive services.
Right, so, and I get that. So when you're looking at the 4 units at 30%, which based on what you presented was at $21,900 per year, and then the 66 units at 60%, which was $43,800 per year. So when you look at someone on a fixed income, assuming that's mainly coming from Social Security, the 60%, I mean, again, it depends on a lot of issues with, you know, how long they worked and if they have a surviving spouse and blah, 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 blah. But that's basically right. That means that their only revenue stream is really Social Security. I mean, that's...
Not necessarily. We're getting into Section 42 tax credit compliance ruling, the Internal Revenue Service Code.
Ooh, you're getting tacky
on which way exists. So from a pension, Social Security is easy. I get a check, that's tax.
Yep.
Right? When it comes to savings accounts, 401ks, IRAs, pensions, anything like that, you know, you can own your own home, you can own real estate, it's broken down into a monthly allocation. So the way I always describe it to people, which doesn't necessarily help in this case, is, you know, we have a lot of people that work, and we always encourage them to apply. Because, you know, 7 out of 10 people that we get applications from, even though they don't probably realize it or think about it, end up following under those rules once you take that allocation and we put the math to it that the Internal Revenue Service has out. So one of the things with this building, and the income limits will be changed in about a month is what we're expecting. We're expecting those to increase substantially. But we have a lot of 2 bedrooms in this unit because we do see not just, you know, one individual, maybe 2 widows, but otherwise we also see still married couples, or, you know, that we see that we've offered those 2 bedrooms when we see it a mix. We see more than just one person necessarily in that low income unit, like we may see in some other markets.
Okay.
Because of the location, the type of project, everything that fits around it.
All right. The only, okay, so that was all my questions. My only comment is, and I know when you were here on Thursday, there was some compare and contrast with the other project that we did up in McHenry, or we funded up in McHenry.
Yep.
And I understand the nuances and differences between the two projects. But when you look at what we funded for that project as a grant versus what your request is for this grant, it's, you know, in essence, almost double what we did. And I understand the nuances and the differences between them. So I just have a problem with the ask being twice as much, and I'm not trying to be equitable, but I'm trying to be reasonable, I guess. So my comment is couched with an understanding, and you kind of addressed this a little bit last Thursday. If you didn't get the 1.960, I know your comment to that question was we would figure out a way to make up the difference, but I want to understand what does that really mean for the project, because I think the project is a viable project that is, quite honestly, a lot better put together than the other project was, which is why that project hasn't started yet, probably. But that being said, I need to be somewhat equitable in distribution.
Yeah, we've gone through this a few times, and I completely appreciate the situation that 1 year in, we're in, 3, we put you here because of our ask. I can't change the need and all of the reasons why, and we've talked about a little bit, but I go back, and I don't have the total project cost of that project, but I think that's where I kept going to, the per unit amount versus what we're building and why. And then the other part is the ask on a per unit on the construction cost, right? So when you look at a dollar relative to an investment per dollar investment we're making, I'm guessing that application off the top of my head of what they have was probably about a $9 or a $10 million project. So when you take our dollar that you're investing into us, it's actually going further than what you're getting better impact, right, from that investment. It doesn't change the fact that it's a higher amount, and I appreciate that. And we could sit here for a very long time and mull this over, and I would not have a path of where I could tell you exactly where the money is going to come from if you take them away, which I completely appreciate, would not be upset by. I think that's the part that we're going at is what we're asking is if you look instead of the full dollar amount, $1 million versus $1,960,000, it's the impact of that dollar that's going in, what investment you're getting for it. And that's where it's easy for me to say that ask becomes a little bit easier when it's double the amount. I've used the term a couple times and I've said to my partners, which is terrible to do, but the passing the hat, right? If we're passing the hat and everybody's sticking in to help, we want to be good stewards. We're so appreciative of the opportunity we have in front of you. I just don't have a number I can point to and say, hey, if you give us $1.6 million instead of $1.96 million, I don't have that answer, but I also don't want you to feel underappreciated of what we've done, and we will just have to work harder and figure it out. So I'm talking in circles a little bit here, but I just don't have an answer other than the fact of why we're asking what we're asking for, the difference between those projects, and how, from an investment standpoint of how far your money's going, in relation to that dollar, why it's worth more than what they are getting, or have got.
Okay, Brian?
I think it's really important for us to recognize the fact that, we could take the total amount of our funds that we have and just divide it up equally and say everybody has the same thing. But we know that projects are individual, requests are going to be individual. We have to look at what those individual projects are. And even if we're looking at low-income housing opportunities that might be worthy of consideration, each project is going to stand on its own. And I think that that's the important part that we have to understand, is that it's just a different project. It's a different requirement in terms of what the construction is going to be and what the outcome is going to be in terms of that product. And so I think that we have to be really careful and not say that, okay, we have to worry about, and I know that this sounds biased and I apologize, but I think we can't look at anything but an individual project. We can't say, okay, we set precedent over here, so therefore we look at it this way. Everything is individualized.
I feel that this is a much better project than the McHenry one, and if you go back and listen to the tapes, I had a lot of issue with the McHenry project, and I gave their city manager a lot of grief about that whole situation. I mean, it is a completely different project. You know, they were trying to take a blighted building and basically convert it, which was increasing the cost per unit because the city of McHenry didn't want them tearing the stupid building down. And as you know, trying to do a conversion from an old building versus new build, it's not comparing apples and apples. And so I don't want to be perceived as trying to compare apples and apples, but you know, what they originally asked for and what we granted them was about 2/3 of what they originally asked. So the board felt that there was a lot of situations with that project that we just couldn't justify. And so that's the frame of mind that I'm coming from, not necessarily, because they really are two very different situations going on. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I completely appreciate where you're coming from, and I get it. I mean, it's just a difficult situation, right? I mean, it is a reality that we all live in the world and how it is, and I completely appreciate your frame of mind that you have with it. I wish there was a fancy answer I could give you, or I was comfortable making something up. I'm just not. I mean, I spelled out everything of where we're at and how, and if it's not appreciated or believed of the variables that we've given, then I think that's a conversation. If not, all I keep coming back to is I don't want to draw a hard line in the sand because I don't think that's good for any party, right? But there is no magic pill that I can say or give that says here's the dollar amount I can't go past this.
Okay.
We're at end, right? I mean, we have that analogy, but we're the Costco. This project is the Costco rotisserie chicken. It's the Walkley, right? I mean, it's an important piece of this. It's here. If this project stood alone by itself, it's one that I'm not sure moves. But when you put it into the broader scale of the $130-something million investment, the impact that it needs, and how it fits within covering all residents, being able to fit there, it's a very important piece.
Well, and similar to McHenry, I'm looking at this as a catalyst for Woodstock. I mean, I don't need to reiterate, Woodstock's had a problem with this chunk of property for 20 plus years. I mean,
A little while.
yeah, a little while. So, I mean, I appreciate the fact that your company is willing to be as thoughtful as you are to try and develop what I feel is important for the overall city of Woodstock and for that region, you know, in totality. So, I mean, I appreciate everything that you're doing. It takes a special company to take that approach, and you guys made a good selection out of your three.
I would say it's far more direct catalyst that there's a direct phase 2 and phase 3 that are planned immediately after this phase.
Well, Brian was pretty wishy-washy on phase 3. He's like, well, it's gonna happen. We just don't quite know when. There's a lot of factors that go involved in phase 3.
I haven't changed my sense. I quit trying to look into the future 3 years ago. It becomes, I will tell you, phase 3, I say with relative confidence, will happen. What I am unsure of is that unit mix what those are, and I think we've been pretty straightforward on that. We have hope, we understand what everybody wants, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we build a project that works within the city of Woodstock.
Right.
And that's the beauty. I don't look at it as a bad since the last one. We're really going to be able to change the community, what's available, set a market, and I think time is your friend because it allows that need to change and better understand. When you don't have when you're putting new type of product in, and you're setting a market for something, it really gives you a list to say, okay, now this actually works. Where in the past didn't think it would, now it does. So we don't look at it as a negative, but it's the third. The two are very well set. This is what's being built. The third, there's a framework, propose something, but we have also said at the time there's a reason that.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've already seen the exterior renderings for that third phase building. It's already come to our Historic Preservation Commission for the overview for downtown. It's already going to the Plan Commission next month for site plan, including the third phase. So it's not a question of whether it's going to happen. It's, like you said, it's just a unit mix question of what's that going to look like in the end, what type of units.
Got it. So. Committee members have any other questions, thoughts?
No, I mean, I'm supportive of this project. I think, it meets a bunch of our needs. Addressing needs for 55 and plus is really important for our county.
Okay. Does anyone share my concern at all regarding the $1,960,000, or am I the only one that shares that issue?
No, it's a big number and it is a little scary. But it's a big project.
It's a big project.
Yeah.
As he said, the broader scale impact of what it's gonna do for.
Exactly.
And I'm not gonna put it just to Woodstock, I'd say all of McHenry County. And they do talk about being on a list for, a statewide list to bring people to this project I don't remember the name of it right now. So it isn't, I can take the just Woodstock out of it for me. But, scary big number, but I don't know what another number would be.
Well, and the other thing too, though, all the units are within this area of need. Like with the other project, it wasn't solely just for people within a certain income level, right? And then it also depended upon additional funding, so, and it didn't go through. So we had that money sitting out there.
Not the first time.
No, right.
May go through the second time, you don't know. But.
Right, but I just think that, and this allows for, the idea that it's in Woodstock, but it also keeps people in the county, if maybe they're in their own home, but now they can go to Woodstock where they're within it's a walkable community. It makes it easier to age in place when you have those kind of amenities nearby. And you're still near family if you happen to be from the county anyway, so.
Well, in the end result, we're not paying it out until we get certificate of occupancy, so
Yep.
I think that mitigates the risk.
No, and I agree with that, but I just, okay.
Well, this is brick and mortar that's going to be here for decades and builds into the economy. I mean, this is, I would think, an ideal example of what we'd really want to invest in. And I think the amount is extremely reasonable for what they're doing.
And fills a need.
Yes.
Huge need.
Very much.
Okay.
It's in our strategic plan.
Yeah, no,
This is what we want to do.
I just raise questions and I'm good with it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've said it before, and we don't take lightly. We completely appreciate everything we've asked for and understand it's a big ask, and we appreciate the opportunity to do this. Look forward to keep working on the project.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, Garrett. Okay, last is the MCEDC.
I apologize. I've got a business obligation that I have to leave.
Okay,
So
that's fine.
catch you at the cow.
That's fine. So, I struggled the most with this, Jim. I'm going to couch my comments by saying that being the liaison between the county board and MCEDC, unfairly, my level of expectation is biased. And so I was very disappointed and frustrated. My wife actually came in and talked to me because I was yelling at my computer. I have a lot of issues with what was said and what was proposed. I don't really know where to go with this. I don't know if the committee wants to spend the time to go through all of my comments, questions, concerns, or what we want to do with this proposal. What do you guys want to do?
We're here.
Well, that's
And
why
the
we
reason we had a special
rescheduled.
meeting was for
Right.
Carolyn and Brian
And you,
and
yeah.
Terry
Yeah.
Stevens. But so everybody did have time to get their thoughts heard on this, on all of these, actually.
I would like to hear what your primary categories of concern are. I think that's important to understand.
Well, okay, I will start off with, I agree with the committee that the seminars, to me, are in essence the most important part of this program. And what I heard was that the seminars are kind of, I don't want to say not important, but kind of, we will try and work them in type thing. To me, if you accept the fact that MCEDC is going from helping manufacturers to helping retail, which is a new avenue and a new stretch for the organization, and in turn changes the paradigm of what MCEDC was originally founded on, that's fine. We can make that jump and have that acceptance. But when you look at the industries in the retail sector, I agree with your concept that there are probably a lot of retailers that really do not understand and need help in regard to how do we get out there and generate customers, how do we gain customer interest. The COVID impact that has impacted brick and mortar places has been life-changing, and I think for a lot of business owners that spend a lot of time in their business and spend a lot of time in their business and not necessarily on their business, that has been a real challenge and a problem for them. The problem that I have is that when you look at the seminars, to me that provides an open door for all of the businesses to be able to walk through and make that transformation to what their business potentially could be or should be going forward, based on whatever that is for them individually. To only focus on 80 initially and have the seminars as a somewhat afterthought, I think is, to me, backwards. That the seminars are the most important key component, because not only is it providing an opportunity for all the businesses, which is what this ARPA is supposed to be doing, but it provides the ability for then perhaps going off and doing 80 separate businesses or some number of those businesses. It actually will help define and refine what that focus should be based on actual needs of focus groups / seminars that you can build that area from. We may find that e-commerce is a huge component, and that's where we need to spend all of our time. It may be, and I didn't understand all the jargon that was being used by Shaw and by yourself, and Terry actually kind of got into that jargon too, whatever that stuff was. Huh?
Basket in itself.
Yeah, I don't know what all that stuff was. But, you know, the reality is maybe that we find that that's of interest. And so conceptually, that's in essence the main things that I mean, you know, and then I can get more into the weeds about the program itself and the implementation of the program, but top line issues, that's my top line issues.
So how do you respond to that, Jim?
Well, my experience working with the retail community in the region, which is only in the last 3 years through the pandemic, which is where we try and navigate the federal and state funds that were applicable in those situations, is that a primary issue that they brought to me is, tell me somebody else who's doing this so I can go and talk to them. Tell me another way that I can get the information that somebody's already had the experience. And I took away from that particular conversation over the last 3 years that community, in the way I look at the community as a large entity, needs to have some demonstrated successes within the framework of whatever we're trying to change. And in this case, we're trying to change the way that people have traditionally done retail to a post-pandemic retail setting. And so we had targeted geographically dispersed, broader industries than manufacturing, which we had served for all the time up to 2020. And we had targeted different neighborhoods of businesses in order to be able to have the highest likelihood advocates, mentors, people that would be representative of the change and or potential change, and then partnered with a company that does those types of changes with smaller businesses. And then after we had these sort of demonstrated hosts in place, we do a seminar series that invites everybody to that seminar series in order to be able to get the same detailed type information they have within a very specific time frame, and have a friend that says, yeah, I did that, and here's how you could accomplish it. So that was the sequence and the logic that I had. And I do agree that the seminar series are incredibly important. We had a partner who pulled out, and so we had anticipated to go forward with the rest of the process, getting our hosts put together, and then develop the seminar series as we go through that. In fact, the hall conversation with Shaw Media said we might be able to pull that together ourselves. So, which is, I think, what somebody asked on the question profile here, would the Shaw Media step up and provide some of the seminar series? So Brian, the direct answer is we thought we had to have some demonstrated examples of what it is that people actually change and go do, and the willingness for them to have conversations with, as Larry had suggested, some of their competitors, and be able to then provide some dollars at the initial stages to cause them to convert not just a little bit, but completely. And then the follow-on would be a series of education forums that probably will go on for a very long time, not just within the scope of the grant. So Mike, that's my initial response, Chairman.
Okay.
So I guess one observation I would have, and I would understand, because we all talked about the importance of the seminar series. But it's one thing, and I think we even got into sometimes these seminars are free because the person giving them is getting exposure, and they'll offer free seminars because they can get people to come in, which I think are really valuable, and people can take advantage of those. But the difficulty is you still have to then take that information, go back to your business and figure out how to implement it. And that's what I think the problem is that people don't know how to implement these strategies to actually make them work for their particular business. And I think of all the things that I'd love to be more efficient at or do better or whatever, but then you get overwhelmed with the information, and you really have this other thing that you got to do to get your business done. And suddenly that seminar you went to, as interesting as it was, it doesn't get implemented, or it doesn't do any, I mean, it's, now you have additional knowledge, but you're not implementing it. And so I guess and I'm not necessarily advocating one way or the other, I'm just seeing different things, components to it, but having that process where somebody actually understands your business, walks you through some of these components would be very helpful to you. Then when I come back not only to a seminar, but I know somebody's actually done it, I can say, okay, I can get rid of the noise. Okay, what worked for you? My business is very similar. What worked for you? I don't need to worry about this other stuff if it's not going to help me. Can you show me what you've done? So I guess I see that there's some value in getting that information out to people very directly, as opposed to making this all about, I don't know, seminars and then hoping the businesses figure out how to implement it on their own. I don't know.
Go ahead.
Well, so your partner that dropped out, was it experience or was it money that's the issue? So is it that nobody can do the seminar, or is it you need money to do the seminars?
We originally scheduled money to do the seminars. The CEO of the partner left the organization, and the organization went into an idle space, not distributing any money.
So how much money is the seminars going to cost?
So we had budgeted seminars that were at or around $12,000 a piece, and we had scheduled 12 seminars over a 12-month period, and then follow-up activities which were less. And that sum total came to around $200,000. It was not $196,000, but a rounding number at 200.
So I mean, we do think the seminar is important, or many of us do. So I mean, that could be just stipulated as part of the grant, that if we agree to this grant, that $196,000 is for the seminars.
Go ahead.
So I have a couple things. I asked last week, was it last week? What the measurable results were from Shaw, and they said they didn't really track it. I have a hard time with that because we really don't know what the return on investment would be. And I find it difficult how we would then reimburse you for expenses, because we have a very strict policy on how we reimburse for the expenses on the grant. So that troubles me a little bit. The other part is, have you gone out and asked the different retailers exactly what they need?
Yes.
And what exactly do they, is it online marketing? Is it online shopping?
Yes. And I'll let you do a quick thing here because I did a bunch of the research, but they don't know how to target the new customers and using non-traditional social media. They don't know how to contain customers over a period of time in long relationships. It's a fickle buyer that shops in a different way than knowing where the store is and the person that was originally. They are interested in the technology side of it, but don't understand the components of the cloud, how to do point of sale stuff while you're doing basket sales or online checkout processes. They don't understand how to keep a customer by having a relationship with that customer that is a non-sales relationship. These are newsletters and blogs and having a relationship online in addition to a selling relationship or an advertising relationship. And then most importantly, I think they don't have a collection of people that they can go to problem solve, because it's a very dynamic, changing system every year with new technologies. And they don't have somebody down the street that they can say, hey, have you tried the new Zelle transfer systems? And nobody knows that in their neighborhood. So it's a series of getting them kick-started, showing them how to have a new relationship using these customer relationship using these social media platforms, and then having a relationship with each other to help problem solve over time. That's one of the big sustaining features that I'm looking for.
If you just have a piggyback.
Yeah, no, I was just going to piggyback off of that. I mean, because the other thing I think you had said before too was, it's some of those businesses that came back, well, they didn't really necessarily learn a lot from the pandemic. So I think part of what we need to do is build resiliency into our economy so that the next time we go through this, we're not dropping off completely and then kind of slowly building our way back to level out. I mean, this, in some sense, this is building better capacity should, in the future.
And Caroline, that was a concern. There's not as many businesses as you would think are equipped to deal or maximize their online presence and sales and revenues and all that. And the pandemic, what that did is that basically accelerated everybody's need for it.
Mm-hmm.
Because now that's become kind of the more normal way of doing business. And one of the things it's able to do too is it puts the control of the business, it gives the business a control of how they communicate their messaging, their brand, how they build customer loyalty, because they're driving it now. It's not going out to a third party, it's not going out to some, you can directly communicate with your consumers, your customers. We do that all the time, I'm sure. So that need has always been important. The pandemic accelerated it, and now there's an anxiety out there because people are like, I know this is important, I know I've got to do it, but I don't know enough about it. And it's like you had said at the beginning, Chairman, about all these different things that you guys were talking about last time. It is very confusing. There's a lot of different ways to do e-commerce or online commerce, whatever whatever it is you want to call it. And as a result, there's a myriad of options and tools, and so they do need someone typically to walk them through it. I think seminars are great, but I also think that a business owner that went through it, they can say, I didn't go to a seminar only, I did it. I think that's a much stronger endorsement of the program. And that's a need that's just going to continue growing. And if we don't help our businesses in some form or fashion, I think it's going to hurt them longer term.
Brian?
Question, how did you all, I understand that you were looking at 80 different units. What was the criteria? How did you identify those units and made those final decisions, basically?
We started with an arbitrary number of 120, and we started to back down, minimalizing the types. So we have, if you want to really get detailed here, we had about 40 different types of industry in retail and small business in the settings in the McHenry market. We laid over the geography of serving 22 jurisdictions of the region, and then we laid over the likelihood of help you could get from chambers of commerce, internal economic development people at the municipalities to help us navigate the recruitment process and identify these folks. So that curried back to 80, and then we had some questions on whether or not we could even shrink that size even more, and it comes at a cost of either the industry balance or the geographic balance that we would do. So the answer is yes, we could make it a smaller program, but if we make it a smaller program, I anticipate that there's going to be some complaints either by the geography question, like why is my area not being well served, or the industry question, why is my industry not being well served.
And was there anything in the matrix that you utilized that considered the capacity of these units to help to educate or help to network or help to be part of seminars or whatever as you go to the future?
As part of the grant scoring process, in other words, the rubric that we put together that had the point system was generated. In the point system, part of the character was your willingness to participate with others and to be a mentor and to be a support person. You also had to demonstrate your delta on increased top-line revenues, increased full-time equivalencies, kind of open kimono type of scenario where you're exposing yourself in a way that businesses may not traditionally be willing to do so, and to be able to share. And that particular criteria would be scored at the very beginning before the grant is actually applied.
Thank you. I don't know if I want to really talk about this, but a lot of people don't know my PhD is actually in international economic development, and so I'm an economic developmentalist. That's my function, that's my job, that's my role, I think, in life and society. And I've worked in a lot of international settings relative to development. And one of the things that has come very strongly to the fore as we look at growth and development, it is not to necessarily just, and I've taught a lot of seminars, don't get me wrong, but it's not simply to teach the seminars, because as Carolyn so appropriately pointed out, you can give a lot of information that is never realized, you know, and it's just because people don't have the capacity then to really translate. They have the information, but they can't translate it into reality. And so we've come to this point where we truly believe that one of the best things that you can possibly do is to look at opportunities to grow the work, if you will, to get in there and to start the work on an individual basis, to grow those opportunities, and then use those as the pilot projects or the pilot efforts that are going to help to guide and direct. Frankly, there are some mistakes that are made in some of those, and we have to be able to understand what those mistakes are just as much as we have to use that for education as we begin to network and to follow through throughout the economy. And I think that this structure is a most appropriate structure, and I really strongly support this particular type of structure and believe that it's well grounded, it's very, very appropriately based upon all of the research that's out there in terms of development, very appropriately structured in terms of strategy. And I really, truly believe that this is an exceptional program, and I support it truly as outlined. I think it's the right thing to do.
Tracy?
Maybe I misunderstood, because originally the questions I was going to ask you last week were all about the components of the businesses that were picked, but then it sounded like the 80 businesses have not been picked yet.
That's correct.
Right, so I think that's one of the sticking points too, is having to now create this matrix of how to pick the 80 businesses, because like in your presentation, or in your written,
The application.
in the written application, it sounded like they were already picked, but they aren't
We
picked.
didn't mean to imply that.
And so I think that also became a sticking point last week, was like, how are these businesses actually going to be picked, and how do we know that they're going to participate? And I mean, that sounded like an issue for
Well,
me.
what I got out of
Yeah.
what I got out of listening was the criteria / matrix that you're going to use. We don't have that, and it sounded like you hadn't even really developed it yet. So, to me, that is we have asked for that in the past when.
Not of me. I mean,
No, we haven't asked you.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying from other applicants, we have asked for that because sometimes that is critical to what we're looking for. So, before you go real quick.
No, I was, yeah.
One of the going a little bit deeper, we issued a grant to IMEC. We are having a lot of issues with that grant application on our back end side of it, which I don't know if that's even been 100% worked through yet. To the extent that I had to get involved because of those issues. This scenario that's in front of us is similar in nature with the outcomes and the auditing side that we're going to be looking at. So that brings up another set of issues for me. But IMEC was one of them that we had asked for what criteria by which they were selecting who the grant application persons were. So going back to what Teresa said, it sounds like you don't have that developed yet.
we have a rough rubric that's put together. None of us have seen an application as it's come through, obviously, and so we don't have a lot of the conditions of what the decision process among a small group of people that are going to be able to do that. Kelly, you asked me last week a question about $40-some-odd thousand that was in one of the categories we had, and I told you we were going to hire some consulting to come in. One of the key components of that consulting is the third-party audit system that we wanted to have to maintain the integrity of the use of ARPA funds. So my leadership board has requested that we have a third-party viewer of the authenticity, the guarantee that those applicants that are going to receive the sub-grant piece are appropriate. And then there's a audit on this to make sure that the reimbursables for our administration is all appropriate. And then there's a results-oriented component, which is at the very end. That process is a pretty expensive process, as you paid your consultant to look at our process to maintain those types of audit profiles. So again, I have a leadership board and we have a sterling reputation at MCEDC, and we don't want that to be tarnished either. We want it to be as clean as it possibly can be. So we're going to try to pay for that as we go along to make sure that it's appropriately maintained.
I was just gonna jump on, we got to the 80 number by something, right? I mean, you got to, because you started out with 120, you talked about how many different industries are you gonna try to grasp. So there had to be some kind of matrix or something that got you to the 80 in the first place, right? So I guess I'm not as bothered, just because a lot of that work has been done already in terms of at least narrowing down the industries that you're gonna target, the geographical locations and the types of businesses. At that point, it depends on, who actually applies and making that evaluation when they come in.
It was just the criteria by which that evaluation is going to be made. That's the,
Right.
we have, as a committee, we have asked for what that matrix looks like. What is that? And part of it goes to, we need to make sure that the matrix isn't biased, that it's open for all theoretical colors, races, creed, whatever, and so it's the assurance that we are fulfilling that part of the ARPA grant, because as you know, diversity is a huge component of the ARPA situation. So that was kind of why we did that, and because again, similar to IMEC, they're accepting in applications, right? So it's a situation where Jim can't pick 80 companies. I mean, initially you kind of started off saying, well, we have an idea of who we'd like to use, and we can't do that. It has to be an open process that you fill out applications through a portal or whatever means, but then the selection process is just as critical to meet the diversity requirements of the ARPA.
Three different things here. The first is that I think that my biggest concern is time frames, because these types of things take a long time. It's not something that happens quickly, and so I'm really a little bit concerned about the time frame that we're working on here, and whether we can meet the requirements that we have relative to fund distribution in this period of time. So I'm going to put that aside, because I'm going to assume that you all are prepared to deal with that, but I think that's a concern that I have. The second thing is, I think the point about diversity is very, very well stated, and I think that you all need to establish some minimum level of diversity component in there as you're making these selections. I don't pretend to be the expert in making those selections. I don't think we are the experts, and I don't think that we should necessarily need to have their rubric or their matrix for making those decisions. I think they're well qualified to do that, but I do think that we have a right to expect a certain amount of diversity there, and I think that needs to be the goal that you all establish. The last thing that I want to say is the fact that I think that the EDC has a remarkable track record in recent years under Jen's leadership, which I give him a lot of credit on, and the board and the people, the leadership group that he's pulled together to provide great advisory input here, but also to provide the technical assistance which is necessary to move this forward, one, in a timely manner, and two, in a most professional manner. And so I have a lot of confidence in this approach and a lot of confidence in this application. I think that it gets to the heart of some of the things that we're really trying to do with ARPA funds, and that's economic development. I mean, it's huge. And we have evidence, most recently with the COVID, that there is significant need for transitional effort on behalf of our businesses. They have operated and done a lot of this on their own, and I'm absolutely astounded that so many of them survived. Now, we lost a lot, don't get me wrong, and that's tragic, I think, but I'm astounded at how many of them were able to make these transitions. I think what we need to do, though, is to take this the next level, because with all due respect to folks at the state level and the national level and the international level right now, there's going to be a lot of issues that come forward that we're going to have to be dealing with in the future. And I'm not just saying we, I'm talking about individual business people. And so I think that this is a great way to prepare them for these transitions and to become truly transitional in their efforts so that they can accommodate the needs as they come along and strengthen our economy both locally and nationally. And I believe in this process, I believe in the effort, and I think that this is a well constructed project.
So, I do agree that our businesses need help in however they can, especially the small businesses. And I like what he said about the diversity, and it needs to be built into the rubric, definitely, because it needs to be a part of this. You put it in your application, it needs to be a part of it. Who will be reviewing the applications?
So, there's a large bucket of applications that are coming in, and that'll get reviewed by Shaw, a board group that I put together on my leadership board, and staff. And there will be invitees to come to be a part of that as well. Then there's a second level, let's call it a thinning of that particular group, that hits a lot of the criteria that we're trying to maintain, which is diversity of industry, the inclusiveness characteristics, and the geography that it has to be served throughout McHenry County. And then there are a set of criteria that we're going to do staff level review on, which is the ability, let's call it subjective, but our ability to interview and understand that the businesses will implement some of the areas, will be a good mentor to others, and will actually be a good representative of that as a grant recipient. So there's a quality standard that has to be involved, which is part of an interview process. And that's what Ed's going to do a lot of his time with, to make sure that if we're investing this time and the community's resources into these businesses, that they're going to turn out to be what we hope they will be, which is successful and deliberative, being able to talk to others. And if they make mistakes as they go along, they'll be able to express that they did that, so you shouldn't do that. So we're making only organic mistakes in the process. And that is, again, I think, partially subjective. So again, the filtration process of getting the big things narrowed down to the selection criteria, and then the interview process is the way we foresee the best success coming out of it.
Okay, so, not to be a pessimist, but if I'm looking at, if you grant a business the $20,000, and they looked good on paper, they looked good when you talked to them financially, and then they end up going out of business, I don't know if we would be able to reimburse that amount because it wasn't a successful grant. I don't know, that's why I'm wondering. So that's hard for me to put money behind that if I'm not sure. I know it's all going to be risky, but I think that's a portion of the risk that we're looking at. I guess one thing, to put it bluntly, is when you're looking at businesses, and if you see two businesses and one looks like it's probably going to fail, and even with this money, it's probably going to fail, and this one is better financially, how do you make that hard decision?
So this is a big discussion we've had among economic development professionals all around the country, and specifically in the Chicagoland market. When the first monies came out, the CARES money, many of my colleagues said, let's get the money out the door. Our job is to get the money out the door. And many of the folks in county government had predisposed, when it was above 500,000 pop, had predisposed that staff was going to push that money out the door. The criteria wasn't there. The criteria was to distribute and to get that pushed out. This next level of grantsmanship is about mistakes learned, which is don't just get the money out. You should cause no harm to a business. And so during the pandemic, hardcore portion of the pandemic, we wanted to keep people employed as long as we could. But if a business was going out of business, the notion among all the economic development professionals was that should not be, we should not keep them afloat if we know intuitively that they're not doing a bunch of the right things to be able to be successful. So it's to fail fast. And at that point, we let market conditions take over, and we pick businesses that look likely to expand and pick up employees, pick up that market share, pick up those customer bases. And it's we're in a cause no harm type of world, in our world. We don't want to prolong things if they don't look like they're going to be successful. And so that's a skill set we develop over the years to be able to determine the high likelihood. And I generally don't do a bunny trail, but I'm going to do a quick bunny trail. We do this same thing with major industrial buildings coming through. When a client comes in and says, hey, I want to do this, and it's a $25 million building, we have to know that they're going to be able to pull that off. And we're putting a lot of energy and faith in our good trust into the idea that that's going to be a success. So it's a skill set we develop. It's something we have to be able to be successful at in order to do our jobs.
Okay. I have one other question. So sustainability. That was one thing that I think most of us worry about here, because when you guys were here last week, Shaw said it was a 3-month, you said it was 18-month, and then you kind of agreed it was a 3-month cycle for the businesses. So it was kind of hard to know if you guys were collaborative on that, if you had
It's a very fair question, that particular one, because I'm looking at it, how do you get 80 businesses processed through in that period of time? That's 18 months. They were looking at it from their perspective, which is how long they're going to actually develop and measure and do the work with a business, which is 90 days, 3 months. So it's I hope that clarifies that.
It does.
Okay.
But when this grant runs out, or when, if you receive this $1 million, what then? Are you going to continue to do this to help other businesses? Because, I mean, it's not just COVID, there's other problems with certain businesses. So how would do you plan to continue it?
Yeah, my opening comments, I made some sustainability comments on that. And since I have a board member here, and it's an open forum, I'm reluctant to give a promise that we're going to reserve some cash back, because I haven't gone to the board yet to ask them if this is the way to do it. But I suspect that we will charge them a membership fee, probably $500 for EDC, that hopefully they will be along with that. That would reserve to the the extended dollars that would carry on for sustainability over time. But again, I haven't presented this to the board. I haven't done any of the pre-work to show the business model of the sustainable thing. I do know it costs between $20,000 and $30,000 or some number like that, with Shaw's match on that, to do 10 additional businesses. And maybe we find that $7,000 is a better number, or it's, at the end of this grant cycle, it's $29,000, and we reduce it to 4 or 5. So again, I'm going to learn a lot as we go through this process. Very few people other in the rest of the country are doing something like this. So we're not tip of the spear, but we're leading edge on many of the things we're trying. And it's my ultimate end to learn as we do. We're entrepreneurial. We're going to learn what the right success factors are in order to be able to perfect this program. That's extremely delicate, because I haven't really been able to go to the board with the whole plan yet.
So I guess one more. I guess that leads me to, do you have to have this approved by your board before you implement it?
Yeah, the board will have to approve the receiving of the money.
So should we have I guess that concerns me then, because you don't have board approval for the program, correct?
Oh, I have board approval for the program. There's
okay.
just an incremental step to
Okay.
initiate the program. And the way you ask it was, do you have the ability to initiate the program? And my answer is, I've got to get some approval to receive the money.
Got it. Okay.
So I'm going to kind of piggyback on that. We had a separate meeting about sustainability. I don't see that model I don't see that at all. I understand what you just said about going to the board, but my problem is, let's just, for giggles, let's just say you get to 80, and what Brian has said earlier was 100% true. You get to 80, you champion those 80, they go out, they're spokespersons to other people in that industry to say, hey, this was extremely successful program, this propelled sales, FTEs, whatever. There is no mechanism that you have provided that shows that there is a revenue stream to cover any part of the cost going forward. If you're saying right now, which you just said a couple minutes ago, that you're not sure 20,000 is the right number, but even if you were to say 10,000, there's no revenue stream that helps the 81st company, 82nd company, 83rd company to offset even $10,000, let alone 20,000, assuming 20,000 is even the right number. Your comment that you just made about the $500, even if all 80 companies put in $500, that's only $40,000. Even at your 20,000 or 10,000, that's only 4 more companies.
With the Shaw match.
Call it what you want. The point is it's not, you're now saying 81st company, basically whatever cost it is, whether through EDC, Shaw, by some whatever means, that's going to be full borne by 81st company, relatively speaking. There may be a minor offset, but to me I can't accept that as a sustainability model for a program. I'm not saying that the 80 businesses wouldn't be prosperous, but you talked about how many businesses there are, retail businesses here in the county. That's a very small number relatively speaking to the total number. And as you've heard from this committee already today, sustainability is a huge part of why we're doing this and what we're doing.
Well, if you're specific to the number of companies served, that's one component, and I understand that, and that's what we're using in this particular kicker-off model, Kickstarter model. But if you're looking at the sustainability of using technology, social media, and having these mentors in our community, that is a sustaining program. That is changing the way we do sales and customer service throughout the area. Whether or not I have a monetary derivative that is doing new companies and new activities, we have changed it. And that's the goal at the end of the day, is to frame up not a glacial change, but something that is really, truly good for the economy here. When we were in our private meeting, I said, I take responsibility for a broader piece of the economy than what we had historically been serving. I see this need. I'm not trying to invent a project in order to get ARPA funds. This thing occurred during, and I was there helping businesses navigate that. And I'm trying to offer a solution that I think is going to be the right solution that has a long-term sustainable aspect to the successes for these businesses in our region. Ultimately, that's what I'm looking for.
I was going to say, well, go ahead.
Well, I think that's where the apex of development and sustainability come together. I mean, the whole context of development is the fact that you are going to be bringing entities to the point at which they are going to be successful, and they're going to, by virtue of that success, move the economy forward by sharing the successes that they've had, sharing the information, and that's going to develop others, and that's going to be the sustainability itself. This program necessarily doesn't have to have a guaranteed sustainability. It's a sustainability of the marketplace that's going to occur as a result of this type of effort and development. So I think that, you know, the sustainability comes through the development itself.
So, and to build on that a little bit, so are there other programs where you've offered assistance And it becomes such a good model that you're able to fundraise off of that. That other businesses will go, okay, wow, that's a great investment, and it starts to build. Because if you're talking about sustainability, you got the why, that we're paying for a certain number of kids for a certain number of years, but that model is dependent upon them coming up with fundraising to keep that number going once that ARPA money drops off. And so and even with option advocacy, part of the seed money was to lay that foundation so that as they went forward, that foundation provided the support that they needed to now start bringing people in, and that private pay provided that sustainability. So it's more of how do we build up the foundation, and if it is making our businesses more resilient going forward, and there are opportunities for businesses to see this an investment for themselves, and it becomes a fundraising opportunity. You might have businesses out there that want to be part of the mentoring or part of the training because it gives them visibility. There are ways to make this more sustainable, but we got to get to that point where it's successful. I think because we had this conversation last year, this is not new. In terms of what you found during the pandemic, and if we are going to go back to business as usual, we are not going to have the resilience we need the next time this happens with our businesses. If they're not learning how to grow their base and to really understand the tools that are out there, it's like handing them the tools that they need. It's no different than retraining a worker to make sure that they have the tools to work in our new manufacturing companies. We have to train them, so we got to train our businesses. It's kind of just the flip side.
I appreciate what both of you just said, but I didn't hear that from here. I just heard that from both of you.
That came up in that came up last week. We talked about, it came up last
Well,
week about.
it did. I mean, I have some notes about that, but here's where we're talking about small retail businesses, relatively speaking, right? I mean, we're not talking about I'll say larger businesses that are perhaps franchised or have, 10 locations or 20 locations. I think a lot of business owners currently are working in their business and not necessarily on their business. And we know already that a lot of them that made it through the pandemic made it through and are now coming out the other side and are hopefully growing their top line numbers and hopefully they're finding success. I mean, if you really didn't make it through the pandemic, the chances of, most of them folded. I mean, the reality is that took such a toll that they didn't see that they could get through to the other side. So the ones that did make it through to the other side, I feel are financially strong, or the ownership or management is strong that was able to provide that resource to get them through to the other side. And so I think the other side is here. I mean, there was an issue in Cranes this past week about the theater business or theater industry here in Chicago and how that has not rebounded. That is one of the lagging industries in the Chicago economy that hasn't rebounded yet. And there's they got a lot of money in order to support theater, but now that money's running out and the people haven't gone back to live performances. They said that it's still down 30% from a sustainable model. So I think there's still a flip side to the retail segment that we have to look at. My concern is that I agree with what you're saying, Brian, about, the ability to, a company is successful and that does raise economy as a totality. But, when you're a smaller business and you make a proposition that says, hey, I see how you're being successful, even if you're in a completely different industry, and I want to be successful, I want to try and implement some of the tools that you utilized, I still got to come up with the cash to be able to implement those tools. Even if I have the heart and willingness and the support of MCEDC, of you as a business has already gone through it and say, hey, I will hold your hand and help you through this, I still got to come up with the cash to be able to do it. You didn't have to come up with the cash, but now I do.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I think that's the way the system works. I mean, I hate to be so blunt about it, but I think that is exactly what happens. Anytime we put money into these types of efforts, these types of programs, people may not necessarily always be able to have the scholarships for the YMCA camping program. I think that is the way that it works, but hopefully we move to a position where these entities, these organizations can start doing some of their additional fundraising through other efforts, or companies that have been successful decide that they want to be a mentor and they want to help sponsor, and so maybe they'll sponsor then the next person. It's that whole concept of pay it forward type of thing. And I do, I guess I'm Pollyanna, and forgive me for that, but I do believe that there is a lot in the economic arena in which that does occur. There's an opportunity, because of the growth of the economy and because of development, to help to pay this forward in a variety of ways. And I use that term somewhat loosely, but it is very much proven. I mean, that's the way the systems work, and we can't be continually footing the bill, That's not our goal, though. And I think that they will do that, and companies will do that as they move forward.
And just to add on to what you were saying, I mean, yes, some businesses did make it through the pandemic, but they're not necessarily thriving.
Right.
And they're not saying, and I hear them say, well, I can't afford that for my employees, and so their employees aren't really making a heck of a lot of money, but they're still working, so they're grateful for that. But, I guess if there's an opportunity to get our local businesses to do better at what they do, some survive, absolutely. But they're complaining about how they can't afford anything. They can barely hire the people that they got, or they're down in staff, and so I don't know.
Well, is the concern that it ends up that we pick 80 winners, when we don't pick them, your group picks 80 winners, and everybody else is kind of left still floundering, and that's the issue. We have to we wanted this grant to be able to support up the rest of the businesses in the community, and there maybe isn't a way forward. That's not necessarily clear how that's going to happen.
That's my issue.
Right, that's the issue. The issue is repeating. There are 80 winners will be picked, and everybody else will still be left unhelped.
Well, and I don't go quite that far, because
Yeah.
I think those 80 people will help other people, but not financially. And like Carolyn just said, there's a lot of businesses that are still, I don't want to say they're in the red, but they certainly aren't in the black too much. And again, as you pointed out, you have to spend money in order to pivot your company to being successful. And you have to be willing to spend that money to pivot it, right? I mean, it just doesn't, it's not, if it was just doing stuff without costing money, we could just do the seminars and that would be the end of it, but it's gonna take money. And I don't, Terry's not here, but, Terry obviously had more knowledge about this, but, her concern was even the $10,000 that each company, because $10,000 was going towards stuff, software, non-tangible things, and $10,000 was actually going to be able to help their individual business. Her comment was $10,000 is a drop in the bucket to what's really needed, to implement some of the tools. And she made comments about the fact that some of these tools are ridiculous. You can't even start to look at them for $10,000, and Shaw agreed with whatever those were. So, even at the $10,000, I think that 80, in your case, what you call winners, will be more successful than they are right now. But even that success is going to require them to put in more money after this grant's over with to fully make the completion of that success. And we haven't seen a matrix, but that needs to be a component of that also, that you're dedicated to seeing this through so that you are successful. Because there's no, again, and we've talked about on the sustainability side, there's nothing worse than starting something, whether you have successes or not, and then having to shut it down or have it not be snowballing and having a positive effect going forward. I mean, we've done enough grants where that is a very large component of that grant application / commitment by the winner. Oh, Larry hasn't had a chance yet.
Oh, okay. There's been a lot of talk about the mentoring, and there's some mention of the seminars, and the other members here have, I think, have educated me a little bit to the point that the seminars aren't as important as I would have thought they were to start with. But I do think when you get to the mentoring, there has to be some opportunity for those business owners to have, and the follow-up seminar, I think, is an important component if they are going to do some mentoring. I don't see that being one-on-one. If I'm wrong, you guys have some more experience on this. I think the follow-up seminars need to be a component of this for the mentorship to happen. And I think that the mentorship is important, and I don't know how else you would get that. Before I lose the floor, and you can answer that in a second.
I'll give you as many questions as you want.
Okay.
You want them to answer that first?
Well, I mentioned last week that maybe making the seminars a condition of the grant. And I don't know if that's, Jim seemed to be somewhat receptive to that. At the time, I was talking about the seminars in coordination with the businesses, but now I can see that it's probably more important as a follow-up to mentor the other people. So yeah, if you want to comment on that, or if anybody else?
So since your questions last week, we had a lot of calls, and I think we can assure you that we'll put the seminar series in as part of the overall grant process. I'm not sure how to carve out the budget yet to be able to do a $200,000 program, but we've gotten to a place where I think we can figure out about $60,000, which gets us started, and then we're in the seminar business at that point. I've got some outside grantors interested in helping fund us if we can demonstrate that we've got some grant recipients. I've explained the program to them. Some grant recipients that'll be the advocates, testimonials, and the people that'll talk at some of these seminars. Bring in some talent to talk about those things, and then they'll fund the rest of the series on the outside. That business model is only a week old. So from the comments you made last week, we went to work to try to figure out if we could find some different dollars to do that. All of the dollars are, Jim, you're not in the seminar business. You need to demonstrate you can do it, and then we'll follow back around. And that's a reasonable request that we have to be able to do. Again, that probably would be not until and after we've done a number of the grant recipients to have the real life testimonials at the meetings.
Yeah, I understand that's, from talking today, I understand the importance of that too. My second question is for staff. We're talking about 80 businesses, accounting, ARPA requirements. I don't want to see staff come to us in 2 months and say we need another person.
Oh, I know that you had made a comment, we'll figure this out on the back end with staff, and I can't accept that answer. We ran into this with IMEC, and I'm not going down that road again. So this needs to be figured out prior to us doing anything. I mean, IMEC hasn't been paid for.
They were paid,
Oh, were they?
but they have not submitted additional requests. And I think the challenge with this one is the sub-recipients.
Yep.
So if we need to establish what you need to submit for reimbursement, I think before the program even starts, with the assistance of Baker Tilly and Bronner.
Yep.
And I think the problem with IMAC is, I wasn't 100% involved, so I don't know if it wasn't communicated well, or they there was some misunderstanding. So I think that was.
Well, there was, and again, it was because, as we've talked about, you learn as you go along, right? And we didn't know any better, and
Yeah.
so, we ran into problems with that. And this program is very similar in nature, in regard to what is going to be submitted, how is it perceived, what does it look like, how does it get through our internal auditor, out through the backside to so I'm glad that IMEC finally got paid, but that bill was sitting out there for 120 days, 150, I mean, it was a long
So,
time.
Chair, you're recommending that, like, there'll be no action today, but we come up with lessons learned from IMAC and a mechanism, because it's a similar program, and then present that back to the committee. I'm trying to get the mechanics of how you would be assured that that back end, as you described it, has been solved.
Well, regardless of what the committee decides to do, that needs to be figured out. I don't really care. I mean, in essence, if the committee decided we're gonna fund this, what I'm telling you is that that mechanism needs to be worked out before you could go ahead and start the program.
Completely understand.
You know, there's aspects to this that need to be more thought out and worked through prior to implementation of anything. And whether that means we just delay things until that happens, or, you know, we move forward and wait, I'm not defining that, I'm just saying those are the type of things that need to be, you know, I understand from your comments from last time, the anticipation and expectation that the reimbursement would happen quickly so that you're not borrowing on the line of credit.
Correct, as much as we, yeah.
Correct. So there are, and again, I have some other issues with what's going on, but I mean, there's issues with that concept. So, you know, especially when it comes back to, similar to what we did with SAGE, you know, what they were proposing originally for reimbursement was going to become really messy on the back end, and this is really not that much different. And so I'm trying to figure out and define a better way so that when you do submit something, it doesn't sit there and it can actually get paid quickly. But there's a lot of work that's going to need to go into making that happen efficiently. And I don't have the answers right now, because if I did, I'd share them with you. But I don't have an idea on how to make that really work, because, again, I think there's parts of this puzzle that haven't, you know, we don't have the puzzle pieces yet to be able to plug it in.
So following up on my question, I need some reassurance from staff, or we gotta go to Baker Tilly. I don't wanna see a cost overrun at Baker Tilly, whatever. Or, like I said, 2 months down the road, we're putting on a part-time person to take care of these sub-recipient issues that we have. And I've gotta lean on you completely on this. I don't know.
I think the majority of the work is on the front end, because right now all requests go through Bronner and then Carrie, and then I approve it, and then it goes to the internal auditor. So I don't think that process would be any different. It would be making sure what's being submitted can flow through with no issue. As far as the volume, I don't think.
You see a path, we just need to get the path a little straighter.
Yes, so if you want quick reimbursement, this is exactly what we need.
But with due respect, I mean, we have to separate the question, right? The question is not what you all are requesting. The question now is getting how we're going to do this for everybody. It's going to be the same thing across the board for everybody, right?
But does it create too much volume?
No, that's not correct.
Because
It's differentiated based on what Jim is asking this program to look like. That's the key difference. It's not like other programs. And so we learned from IMEC and what was expected. So when I was talking with Greg about that, there was a different, in his head, what he thought he had to do versus what we thought he was going to do was very different. There was a communication issue, a breakdown, whatever you want to call it. Even after we explained, this is what we need in order to be compliant, now that forced him to try and change his processes to get that accomplished.
So we're learning as we go. We learned through IMEC, and now we're saying that we're going to have some special things worked out here to make sure that this flows and it all gets taken care of in proper, not only payment, but auditing, correct?
Correct.
And so can't we say, though, I mean, the question still on the table is whether we approve of this particular program at this particular level, right? That's still the question that's on the table?
That's the grant, that's why I'm saying, I'm replying back to what Larry said, but again, whether we approve a grant and we work out the details later, that's fine, or we work out the details and then we approve the
Okay.
grant, I don't really care. I'm just answering Larry's question that,
And I agree with Larry too.
Well, yeah, if the details can't be worked out or it creates such a volume, we're gonna be looking at hiring another person or paying consultants more money,
Well-
then it's a concern.
no, I mean, and what I ended up telling Greg was, listen,
Greg who?
Greg Basie, who's the president of IMEC.
Okay.
So what I explained to him was, listen, this is what you got, you have to fit into this form. If you can't fit into the form, then I'm sorry, we can't continue doing business with IMEC. And so it forced him to go back and work with his staff in order to get that done. And again, like Carrie just said, they haven't submitted anything else. So they may be choosing, this is too much and we're not going to do that. I don't know. I haven't talked to him since that point in time. But all I'm saying is it's better to have knowledge and understanding up front than trying to back end it later and we're all sitting here going, this isn't working.
Agreed.
So I have two things. First of all, follow up on that. So when we have other grants like CDBG and we reimburse them, we expect to have deliverables, correct?
Mhm.
All right, so are we expecting deliverables on this? So would that be return on investment and there's a proof that this business who received this money has an increase in FTEs and an increase in revenue? I mean, is that something that we would expect?
Well, again, I think that's what needs to be worked out. There's a proof component of this.
Right.
You know,
It has to be proven that it's worked.
In the grant application, I pledged reporting to the county board for full-time equivalencies and for top-line revenues. Those two components have a delta from where they started to where the change in the end can be proven out. The deliberation, of course, is, do you wait a year for that information? Is that transformative enough, or is it a more immediate concern? I mean, we've got that detail to work through. But the idea that we'll be able to provide data increase on what the delta change is already agreed to.
I know,
And
but
it also depends on how much money, because you said you don't want to have your line of credit out there very long. Well, it might be, if it takes a long time for that return on investment to show.
that's the point I'm trying to get to. You don't get reimbursed instantaneously after that money goes out the door. There has to be the documentation to prove the gain, and so, which goes back to the whole IMEX scenario. I'm trying to ingrain in you that just because you've spent the money doesn't mean you get reimbursed for it instantaneously. There has to be that second component that, you know, Kelly's bringing up, which may not fit into your model. And so I'm trying to draw that out, to point that out.
Just because there might be some hardship on the MCDC if you guys have to wait for
Correct.
that return, so. Oh,
So who
Oh.
determines, I'm sorry, I was just gonna ask who determines that, like what the return would be? Just to follow,
Yeah.
clarify that.
Well, again, I don't know if that's, I'll be honest, that's somewhat of a gray area that we're having issues with. So I hate to keep on bringing up IMEC. I'm sure Greg's probably pissing me off, you know, like, really? But that's one of the areas of struggle with that situation. I mean, there's a difference between a client who is, take Sage. There's a client that goes, they've been at the facility for a week. We have that data and information showing that they've been at the school for a week. Okay, they got the services that they needed. We can reimburse that, right? There is no, well, how much did you learn while you were at the school? I mean, it's a very cut and dry. You went to school, we reimburse you. The advocacy one. I mean, they're buying commodities. That's a very easy. You spent the money to buy a commodity. Okay, we're reimbursing you for that commodity. We're now starting a program. You have to hire people. As that person gets paid weekly, monthly, whatever we're doing, we reimburse you for their salaries, the weekly, monthly, or whatever we're doing. So there's more cut and dry situations than this particular type of grant request.
That's nice. My other, so when we were talking about sustainability, so obviously my two issues are, you know, reporting or rebates or refunds, whatever, and reimbursements, and then the sustainability. I would like to see some sort of commitment ongoing where we could help those next businesses. So it may not be that 20,000 gift from the MCDC and Shaw, but as some sort of program that's saying, hey, we have experience on helping these businesses, let me help. So it may cost these businesses some money, but you guys have that experience in that program. Is that something that you would?
We're more than open to that. We do not get in the advocacy business, and a lot of that type of seminar training is chamber work. And so the balance between what the local chambers do and what we would do as an extension of our program of work is something we're very interested in participating in. The framing of what that looks like over time is going to come a lot out of our experiences helping do these programs, and it's my guess, and I'm being very frank, I just don't know the answer, is that it will be a lot different than what we think it's going to be today in 18 months from now. But we're very committed to doing that type of work. And we continue to do, we did solar forums, and we did a whole series of other forums. This is a work that we've been doing. They're not seminars, but the audience is, in that case, people who want to put solar in their areas.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of follow up on your thing about reporting. So up until now, I was not on the committee last year and did kind of listen in. I never really, this committee wasn't responsible for coming up with what was measurable in some of these grayer areas, right? I mean, I think, like in terms of what do they have to report on in order to get reimbursement, I don't recall that being something that was worked out at the committee level. I thought that was more of a Bronner, and then in this case, you're talking about Baker Tilly looking at it and deciding what is measurable and what is reasonable based on their experiences as our consultants. And so I get that the reporting is important. I don't know that we as a committee are going to be able to sit here and come up with the metrics. I'm not comfortable with that. That's
No,
what the
we
consultants
don't.
for. Well, right, but my point being that we keep talking about the reporting, which is great because we do need to understand that. But let's put that back on Bronner and just to see if they come up with, because that does need to be upfront. It can't be coming back like it is for IMEC, right, later down the line, and it doesn't work for you and it doesn't work for us. But get that process out in front of Bronner right now. What are the metrics? Are you good with that? Does that work? How long is that time frame? And get that. I mean, are we good with the project, assuming that can be worked out between, them and?
Yeah, I'm not, so typically speaking in the past, the applicant laid out for us what metrics they were deeming as successful. And we as a committee looked at that and said, we're comfortable with that, or we think that's too soft, or we'd like something different, or whatever the committee decided. Most of the time the committee said, yeah, those are good, because again, they're coming to us because they see a need and they want that need filled. They have a passion about whatever it is to begin with, so they want it to be successful too. I mean, we have not found any applicant that just was so terrible that they didn't have a passion and want it. I mean, they never made it score-wise to even come here, right? I mean, there was some applicants, but they never made it to us. So typically speaking, when they came back with whatever their matrix was that they're using as successful, we accepted that, And if Jim's coming to us and saying top line dollar is, and FTE is the basis by which he's saying this program is successful or not, I'm okay with those matrix and saying, yeah, those two things are important to us also. But again, hearing from committee, I think the component of some of the other things we talked about, meaning the mentorship program and everything, is also key indicators of the success of not only that individual business, but as Brian pointed out, the businesses that will sustain going forward and the county and the region. Teresa was first.
I wanted to ask, so last week I asked Bronner about how they were gonna, because they said that it was gonna take a high number of effort, and you'd have to collaborate with them. And then we tried to get an answer from them as to how that was gonna work. And I was wondering if any of us were able to either tell me what they said, because I didn't understand anything they said, or if, because it was garbled. Not because I don't understand English.
Thank you for that clarification.
Mike, if you got any clarification, because I know you've been working on trying to get prepared for this meeting, what Bronner's response was?
I have no clue. I know I didn't talk to them.
Okay.
So no, I didn't.
Carrie, did you know, or either Carrie, did either of you get any clarification from Bronner? Because
I mean, I think it will, I don't think it's an amount of work that we can't handle. I think it's more than, like you talked, like the cut and dry ones, like the ambulance, because of the subrecipients.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it's, I mean, I don't think that it's gonna be a huge amount of work that we can absorb into what we already have set up.
because I mean, it was Bronner who said this is going to be a lot of effort.
It's because of the subrecipient,
Right.
which carries more risk.
Right.
It carries more risk, and it you know, Shannon does a great job in her department, but that raised a whole level of questions for Shannon and what she feels ARPA requirements are versus even what Bronner thought ARPA requirements were versus what staff thought and so it was a cluster that I don't want to go through again, and I would rather upfront figure it out and make sure that everyone's on the same page so that we don't have that. So I think because of how it's processed and because of the subrecipients of it, it is more complicated. I don't know that complicated means more time. It means more time up front figuring it out.
So could we just not ask kind of a subcommittee, if you will, of Bronner and Shannon and Carrie and Jim to get together and kind of sort this stuff out?
Yeah. Somehow it's got to be sorted out. If the group wants to, if the group is interested in funding some amount of this request, then to me, that all gets worked out. Jim's clear about how he's going to be reimbursed, when he's going to be reimbursed, what he has to show in order to get reimbursed, and he's comfortable with that and says, I'll figure it out, I'll make it work. Then to me, that's fine.
Are you all willing to work with the other folks?
Absolutely.
Carrie, you're willing to
Together all
work
the
with
time
them?
to get
Okay.
projects done, so
Shannon's pretty open to that kind of thing. Browner, we pay Browner, so what's the difference, right?
Yeah.
So life is good, right?
So
Yeah, I think that's the point I wanted to make. Is it okay if I interrupt you? I had my hand up a minute ago. To Carolyn's point, let them figure that part out. I'm comfortable that we have some agreement that at the very least, follow-up seminars for the mentorship part of it is gonna get worked into this.
Well,
And I'm confident, and that Carrie said that it's not overwhelming, that we can do it with current staff. So I would be willing to move this forward as it is, as long as that stuff gets built into it.
okay. Does anyone else have reservations about moving this forward, or do you want this information to be worked out and then whether it be hopefully next month, they come back to us and say, this has all been worked out and everyone's okay, and we don't have another hour and a half a long discussion. It's simply provide us the information, matrix about how you're gonna be grading, making sure that diversity is a part of it. I think the committee would like to see that aspect of it. Some assurances that the back end reporting / reimbursement side has been worked out. And then, you know, if the committee is okay with the $1 million ask, then we move it through. I mean, waiting a month is not, and relatively speaking, is not the end of the world. It's just, you know.
I think that we can kind of keep going through these types of things over and over and over and jump again. I think we have to realize and accept the fact that we've got a pretty strong between our folks here, our elected officials here, and EDC. I think we've got a pretty strong group of professionals that understand what the parameters and the needs are. They can work those out. I think that we just need to conceptually determine whether we agree with this program and we agree at the funding level or we don't. I do. So that's kind of where I stand. And I'm ready to move forward.
And I'm pretty sure that's what I said.
I have one more question, because, I do want to help the businesses. I asked this question last week, and I'm not sure if I got the answer I needed. Commodities, the 50,000, that is for the agreements for the software that you will use, okay. Well, that's.
And some production pieces to help train other people and extend, and so there's everything that gets printed, designed, manufactured, all that in addition.
Okay, so I thought that part was gonna be included in the 20,000 that was given to the businesses. 20,000
This
was
is
built into that.
Some of it is, but some of it is going to be distributed to our partners to be able to help amplify the awareness campaign to get applicants in the door and to be able to do a series of, it's our internal marketing costs that aren't borne by Shaw about production costs that we have to distribute outline. And that includes public elected officials and the communities, and it includes reporting that comes up, production reporting. We're going to do our membership, our existing membership and our distribution of 5,000 businesses in the region also gets information every week on progress made to this. We see it as a campaign, but all of that has got purchased pieces to it.
So that is not, so in the 20,000 that's given, some of it's going to be intellectual property, some of it will be marketing. Is that included in that, or is that on top of the 20,000? So that's money you're gonna spend on top of the 20,000 per business?
I'm sorry, I want to answer the question and
I kind of feel like it's double counted. So I because it seems like that money you're going to spend, but then when how do I say this? When the businesses get their money, some of it's gonna be intangible, some of it's going to be marketing, and some of it's gonna be Shaw money. So I feel like it was put in the 50,000, and then it's also included in the 800,000.
okay, it's not intended to sound that way. I mean,
Okay.
if I wrote it the wrong way, I apologize, but a part of the money, the 50,000, is to amplify the program itself, to make the program more vibrant.
The program, not
And-
the business
And then the
itself.
businesses get their allocation, which is custom to their needs.
Okay.
And that's, in the grant application, it's a difficult question to answer because, yes, it's a commodity, but it's being sub-granted out and it's gonna be spent in a different way.
Okay. I guess I
And I know
misunderstood last week then, that's fine.
Well, last week, I must have misunderstood because this is clarity to me on what the question is, so I apologize.
Yeah, that's fine.
Anything else from anyone?
I'm Larry and Brian.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. Then, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So in regard to, which is 4.1 on our agenda, we have a resolution in regard to the 4 grant requests. Based on our discussion today, that resolution would be modified based on SAGE, of what SAGE is doing. I guess I'm gonna ask a general question. So SAGE, we had set at 442,000. MCEDC was for $1 million. The housing in Woodstock was for $1,960,000, and the options and advocacy was for $1,298,515. So besides the one change to SAGE, does anyone have any other changes that they are interested in?
Not interested in changes, but I don't think we clarified your question about whether we would have these guys back next month to answer those questions, or if we're willing to move forward with it on this resolution and then get the answers.
Personally, I would like to hold that one off and get those answers, but other committee members said they'd like to move it forward, so
I mean, I can move it forward because it ties on the vine if they don't come with those answers.
well, it'll already been approved by that point.
But if they don't work with Bronner to get their stuff in order, they're not gonna get the money, correct?
Anyways, right.
They're not gonna get the money, but the problem is we've already allocated that money, so now we're gonna have to go through and pass a resolution to rescind that money so that it goes back into the pool to,
Then I would amend the resolution to take the MCEDC off that list until, or table it till next month, whatever the proper procedure is, after I've been here for 3 hours.
well, it would be.
And I'm
it-
also for
Yeah.
bio break, as they used to call it.
Yeah.
I prefer to leave it on. Larry, I'm gonna just say that. I think that we need to do that. I think we need to move forward with this. I have full faith that they're gonna get things worked out in those regards, and I think that they can do that, and I think that staff can verify that for us. I just truly think we need to move off the dime.
Yep.
So did Terry indicate at all what she had thought about, I mean, because unfortunately she had to leave before we got to this point.
Terry, from her comments from last
I think
meeting,
she had mentioned 2 she was willing to push forward.
yeah, this was not one of them, and she said, Terry's comments were, I wish this was more flushed out, I'm not really understanding it, I'm not getting it, and I can't support it. That's
So-
what Terry's comments were, but,
All right.
but she's not here, I can't.
No, but I guess I could go either way. I'm with you. I think that they'll be able to get that worked out, but if there is still questions, that gives those people who might still have questions, time to get their answers, and then we do it next month. I really don't know the best way to go. I think they will get it worked out, and I'm comfortable with what
Well,
they
with all
get
due
worked out,
respect to Terry, I mean, I think a lot of those questions that she likely had have been answered here today. I think there's been a really good discussion today, so I appreciate that very, very much.
So anyway, I'm not quite sure.
Well, I lean towards Mike's, I don't like the backtracking part of it, and I didn't think of it at the time when I said that to move forward with it, so. You looking for something formal, Mr.
Well,
Chairman?
I don't wanna make a bunch of amendments, so I'm looking for
Okay.
some consensus before we make a motion, so that we're having,
I didn't
keep
think-
Kathy a little cleaner here, so.
Great. I didn't think of the part that would, that there would be some backtracking if there is an issue. I do think they'll work it out. I hope they work it out, but I don't think a month is insurmountable either.
I agree.
That's fine.
I agree. I was
guess-
wondering if we could make a motion for a bio break at some point.
Well, hopefully we'll pass this and then,
We have another thing to go on to after.
oh shoot, well, how about we pass this and then we'll have a break, okay?
I am agreeable to waiting a month so that we have a clean decision whether or not this is gonna be able to be worked out or not.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think it's a relation that we just want to know if it's gonna get cleaned up. Like, I don't know if we've got any more questions.
I don't even need Jim to come here unless there's issues, so I mean, if Carrie, either Carrie says, hey, we worked out all the issues, everybody is on board, everybody's happy, then that's
Good to
great.
go.
I don't have an issue with it. I don't need to spend more meeting time than we have to. Okay, so then if that's the consensus, then I would accept a motion to approve the resolution as modified with Sage YMCA at $442,000, the Alias Foundation at $1,960,000, and Options and Advocacy for McHenry County at $1,298,515. Carolyn makes that motion.
I'll second.
You want to arm wrestle for it?
No.
No, no.
Okay. Teresa seconds that motion. Is there any discussion on that? If not, we'll go to vote then. Teresa?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay, motion carries. All right, so there's a request for a 5-minute
Recess.
recess, bio break, and then we'll come back and do 4.2 real quick, and then we can get out of here.
Are the rooms all
Okay.
Take care, man.
See you later, Jim.
All right, we are back in session again at 12:21 p.m. So we're on to item 4.2, which is discussion on advanced McHenry County water sewer requests. So,
Got an email from January 11th is the
January 11th.
January 11th.
spreadsheet.
Email. So, the reason why I have this on here is, so besides the MCEDC one that we're hopefully gonna pass through next month, there are no more projects on that segment. We've gone through all the ones that qualified point-wise, and we've had all the presentations and we've dealt with all. The only ones that we have left now are the water sewer ones, which I think there's 7 or 6?
6.
6?
How come I got, you're not looking at
Where's the
me?
email from? It's from Carrie.
I'm
That
looking
was
at
from
the
Stephen
wrong-
Gray, sorry.
This
From
is
Stephen
what
Gray.
I have a
last
copy.
week.
Yeah, I did that once too. and I-
Yeah, if you could hand that out, that Carrie's gonna hand out a copy.
Okay,
That's
thank
good,
you.
'cause I got the wrong email up here or something.
Maybe it's, how many do you have on your email?
I have 6, but it's on this, from Stephen Gray.
Well, this has 6, so I guess we got
Okay.
6 we're
Okay,
dealing
thank you.
with.
Yeah, it's the same one.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Thank you.
I probably deleted that email.
And can you
It's
remind me
just
how
a
much-
lot smaller.
How much money, oh, I read it. I'll write on it. How much money we have left to spend?
Oh, this is different.
Assuming that we pass
Oh, never mind.
the one we just said.
Well, we should have about, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie, but I think we should have, if we pass MCEDC at $1 million, then we should have about 6.9 that hasn't been allocated.
Should be a little bit more because of Sage.
Oh, that's right, okay, I forgot about that, sorry.
But then he said.
So
something-
7.1.
He said something about holding 3 back.
That
That includes it.
it is already outside of the 3.
Okay,
That was for the,
fiber.
yes, right.
So 6.9,
Maybe, let's say 7 million. Let's just, for simplicity purposes, let's say 7 million. And we can ask specifically, you can get us that number specifically, next month.
Yes.
Or, so naturally, we're not gonna be able to do all the requests that are here. And again, for the new members that are on here, if, just for purposes of discussion, the old matrix that we used to grade all the projects that we had before was on a 100-point scale. And the problem that we found was the water reclamation ones weren't fitting into what we were doing. So we asked Bronner to go back and create a new matrix based on capital projects like this so they could be graded a little bit differently so that we could have a better evaluation tool. And they went ahead and did that. That was based on 120 points. So these 6 projects, all scored, relatively speaking, about a 70 to 75 based on a 120-point scale, where the other ones that we had looked at were based on only a 100-point scale, and most of them were in the 80s, mid-80s or something.
So this was, what was the scale? I'm sorry.
120. So you can see these score much lower, even on an expanded point basis, than all the other projects, which is why we dealt with all the other projects first, because in regard to the impact and outcomes of how it would affect McHenry County, those had a much broader effect than these are. As you can see, these are all very, I don't want to say individual basis, but they're all, very poignant to a particular municipality or area, which is mainly why they're scoring lower. So I just wanted to get a flavor from the committee, how you want to go about looking at these 6. Do you want to do, 3 1 month, 3 another month, 2 1 over 3 months? You want to look at them all at one time? What you want to do? I don't. I think my challenge is, if we have less money than what the requests are for, how to go about taking that into consideration. And so it's difficult, if, let's just say we decide to split it up 3 and 3, it's gonna be difficult to, be like, well, your 3 came first, so, you're better than these 3, So I kind of prefer to look at all 6 at one time, and maybe we do that at a special meeting instead of at a finance meeting, because that is going to be a longer time. But I'm open to whatever ideas, thoughts the committee has. Larry?
I agree with looking at them all at once, because they have a finite amount of money, and some of them might get some money that has to get pushed over to another one. And we do this in CDBG all the time. And with these types of projects, I want a lot of details on how they can be broken down. If we can do, for example, the Village of Wonder Lake, can Hancock Drive sewer and water be broken into 2 sections so that we can help another one that might need some other money? 'Cause we're not gonna have enough money to do them all.
Yep.
So can they be done in portions, or do we have one from the Village of Cary, for instance, that if you do part of it, you gotta do all of it. You can't do it in a section.
I'd kind of like to know how much it costs, how much the total amount of the project costs. So, for example, I know the first one, Northern Marine Wastewater Reclamation District, it's $7 million per phase, and there's 3 phases. So, I think I'm partial to that one. I have to admit right off the bat, I'm partial to that one, because it is an underserved community, and they have a lot of very low income, fixed income residents. And we're having a tour of Holiday Hills tomorrow, if anybody wants to come see. We're checking out the whole infrastructure, but I'd like to.
Well, I think that so here's what, Larry, you have some experience with this type of, because you've been dealing with, CDBG for a long time, and that's what you guys do, right? You
Yep.
do a lot of this stuff. So, are we in agreement that we should have all 6 come at one time?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we're gonna have all 6 come at once. Do we want to do all 6 at a finance meeting and have it be a really freaking long finance meeting, or have a special meeting?
Special.
I think it's gotta be a special meeting.
Because
Okay.
they're all gonna come give presentations,
Yep.
correct?
Correct.
That's
So
a tough day.
that's fine. So we will do a special meeting.
We're ordering lunch.
Can I just ask for a point of clarification here? Is the intent to make the tough decisions that we're going to go ahead and say, okay, that, for example, that we're going to go ahead and fund a complete request for the 11012, and we're going to do that one, and then somebody else doesn't get something? Or are we going to be looking at percentage requests as has been outlined on this sheet?
I think that's up to the committee. You could say, we will fund all of these, but max cap limit is $2 million. So, we have 2 of them that are asking for more than $2 million, and that would be one way to, cut down that dollar amount. You could say, like they have on the percent of requests, and say, hey, listen, we think your request is good, but we're only gonna fund it at 75% in order to get under our budget. I don't know that the committee, we need to talk about that.
Yeah, I won't know until I see the more information, until I see their applications.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing I was wondering is, we have a sense that there's gonna be money that doesn't get used out of our allocations. How is the process? So, for instance, we already know there's one of our things that we funded that is having a hard time starting because they didn't get the other funding. So it might be a reasonable assumption to assume that money actually is not going to be spent, and so that could have been put towards this. So do we have any mechanism for kind of giving ourselves some freedom in allocating? It ends up being like double allocation with the realization that not all money is actually going to be paid out by the end of 26.
Well, no, it has to all be paid out by 26.
Right, but some of it won't.
No, it has to, otherwise we lose it.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
So, I guess to answer your question in a roundabout way,
Yeah.
let's say that the McHenry project doesn't get off the ground. This next application that they submitted downstate doesn't get approved again. The board can come back and say, we are rescinding the offer for this because of you've been given twice to try and get this accomplished and you're not gonna get it
Yeah.
accomplished. So the board would have to rescind the resolution,
Yeah.
that portion of it.
Yeah.
That money would then come back into the pool. The committee/board could then decide, okay, well, we have this much more money now in our pool that we can utilize. Ideally, we gotta get all of that solidified and done because, as Carrie pointed out, we gotta get the allocation out by the end of
December 25, right?
24.
Right, so we
Oh,
have
24.
12 plus 9, we have 21 months.
Yeah,
To
so
get
I don't
it done.
wanna wait till the last minute
Right.
to do it, because then we're just shooting ourselves for it. Now,
My point, we might actually have enough money to fully fund all these projects, we just don't have it right now to allocate, because we've already allocated money.
yeah, but I'm not gonna be an
You're not playing
airline
that
and
game.
oversell and
You're not
then
playing that
hope to
game.
God that, people don't show up.
So her question, to Teresa's question, when, and you just mentioned it, when is that second round of application for funding for McHenry happening now, in this year?
No, we're not doing anything right now.
No, they're.
At the state.
At the state level,
Oh,
when is
I don't
that
know what,
second round of
I
funding?
don't know.
You're not the only one, though, there's other entities, you just, I mean, you really, IMAC, you really hammered earlier.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that.
Right.
So yes, there are potential. Now, I will say this because Pete's not sitting here, so I'm gonna put on Pete's hat for 2 seconds. Well, we'll always find uses for that money if it doesn't go. I mean, we got lots of county needs and we got county projects that this could be used for and, so.
So if we have it last minute, we'll find a place for it.
Oh, I'm sure the county has stuff that we can utilize, so, but that being said, the board has been very clear, we want this money to go out into the community, so ideally, nothing against you, Pete, but I'm gonna, disagree with you. So we should be able to go into the county if we can and utilize it. That would be a last resort if, at the last minute, we gotta figure out some way to spend $100,000, then great, we'll find something in the county, but I don't wanna do that if I don't have to. But I don't think we can make assumptions
No
that.
double, we're not playing games of double allocated.
No. Well,
You're a good
software-wise.
conservative, you're a good fiscal conservative.
Actually, I'll be honest with you, D365 won't let us do that, because we only have a finite amount of money set aside, and
Yeah.
you can't plug in another program into it, that it's gonna go over budget. So we can't, software-wise, it won't really allow us. And our internal auditor probably really wouldn't like that.
No, probably not.
So,
Okay. Well, yes, I would say I want to see all six before I'm making decisions, and most likely, I would think, knowing myself, that I'd probably say this one gets all the funding because I like their plan, and this one will get partial funding, given that we're not going to be able to fully fund everything. So there you go. There's insight into my thing of how
It's
I
fine.
think I'll end up going.
I think that's great. I'm willing to go. So basically, we're just willing to see if we can max some out and take care of them, and others, if we don't think their planning is correct or adequate, then we just say, okay, well, we'll help you out, but
we can't help you.
we can't help you all the way.
Mhm.
So then maybe we need some information before our special call meeting, because some of the projects where if they don't get the funding, they don't have, that is what's helping them over the finish line. And so,
Good
can they give
question.
us some information about, okay, so if you're funded at 75%, where's that additional dollars coming from? Not that we want them to say, oh, no, and we have to have all of it. I mean, being realistic, if we fund you at 75%, is this project likely to go forward? Or where would you get the other dollars?
Or 60%.
Or whatever. I mean, just so that we know what other options they have, maybe.
So what I would recommend is if we have questions, we express them right now.
That's what I'm
Carrie
thinking.
will take notes, and then Carrie will send out an email to these 6 entities, tell them when the meeting is, say committee is looking for answers to these type of questions, so that they can be prepared to answer those questions when they come in.
Yes.
My first question would be that whenever they do this in CBDG, the question comes out, if you can't be fully funded, what portion of this project can you do and what funds does that take? That's
So that's a better way of saying it.
because
Yes. Thank you.
there's certain infrastructure projects, if you're gonna do it, you have to do it all you can.
Yep.
You can't get a 60% sewer line, because it only goes 2/3 of the way down, and then it's a mess.
I would also
That creates
wanna know
problems.
what's the total amount of the project and what other funding is available for that.
Yeah, what other funding's always important.
Any other questions that members have? So, I'm gonna ask you a question real
Yep.
quick. It seems like you just went through this. Are any of these projects ones that y'all dealt with?
The Villa Valpal sewer extension for the Northern Marine wastewater,
Yeah.
but it wasn't the sewer extension. They had more about the rebating 50% to the line that went to the house.
Water?
Yeah,
I can expand on that. if you
okay,
want.
you've got a better memory than I do, but I was tired yesterday.
So the sewer installation is one whole cost. Each individual house is going to have to pay almost $18,000, a connection fee and the plumbers to actually connect to the sewers. So most of
Because
those.
they're all on well and septic right now?
Yes,
Okay.
and they flood from the Fox River. So that's why they're doing the whole project. And most of those residents cannot pay that money to connect. So Northern Marine is trying to help them with the connection fee.
But I don't think that's what this part is.
This
but I'm
is
not
not,
sure.
this goes toward the sewer line itself, the sewer construction.
So this is constructing the sewer. Ultimately, the households are still gonna pay to connect to the sewer?
Yes.
So how convoluted is, alright,
That's not, I think they put in a request for that and that's not eligible under the ARPA.
Right, they did request ARPA funds for that and were denied.
Are there any pre-19 mitigation dollars available for them for that, from the flooding? Like,
They have,
I don't know if that's technically a mitigation, but it's,
they've tried various things. I have a list,
okay.
so I can talk
So-
about it when we get there.
They put the main line in, I can put a stub out that can be connected to at a later date.
But they,
but this is this municipal or is it unincorporated?
It's unincorporated. And once the sewer is functioning in that area, they have 15 years to connect.
Or,
Probably gets done for them, if they lean on the house.
Yes, that's right, they do. Or if they're moving and the inspector says their septic is in bad shape, then they have to either sell it with the intent of getting a sewer or,
The new people have to come
yeah.
do it.
alright, well, I'm not gonna get all my questions answered here, but anyways, okay. Okay, any other questions that we want Carrie to send to them?
Did that include if they're willing to accept a lower percent? Is that right? Or we-
For me, usually it's a lower dollar amount because they can do this section and not all of it. So,
Okay, so we don't worry about percentages, we just,
yeah, the percentage is a little hard for me.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
you might, the Village of Wonder Lake might say, you know, once we dig that
Yeah.
hole, we wanna do the whole thing.
right, right, okay,
Or then, you know, hopefully if they, like the question of what other funding would be available.
right.
Then we can know what that number is, but it's,
Right.
I wouldn't say it would be a percentage typically.
Okay.
Well, because they have to have it terminate somewhere. So if they say, well, we can't do $4 million, but in order to get to the nearest termination, it's gonna cost, 2.8 to get that, then that's not a percentage, it's a hard number. but-
Right.
So often when I'm reading the applications, I come up with a bunch of questions. Do you think it's appropriate then for me to email them so they have a heads up on what questions I'm gonna ask them? Because they give us an email in their application. So,
I would say for consistency, no. I think these questions that we're asking are something that we're thinking, I'm kind of looking at Larry because he's done this
He's
for
done
how
it,
many
right.
years, so, if these are general questions that everybody gets asked, and they can answer those up front. But I think general questions that you come up with, I think that's the whole purpose of having them here, to be able to ask those questions. And
Okay.
again, I want to emphasize, if this takes 2 months to pound through, or 2 meetings to pound through, then so be it. It takes 2 meetings to pound through it. We've always talked about doing this right, not rushing it through. So let's.
One thing we do at CDBG is put a time limit on their presentation. We had 30 presentations in the last 2 days.
So what was your time limit?
10 minutes for presentation and 5 minutes for questions. And the question thing didn't get timed real hard. If there was some that had more questions for a particular project. But I think it becomes it gets them to the point, for starters, with their presentation. And it also sort of levels the playing field, if you will, in that each one has a same amount of time for presentation.
So what do you want to, I'm fine with that. Do you want to give them 15 minutes each? That's an hour and a half?
I would say for most of these sewer and water projects, 15 minutes would be enough. But we did run ahead, even at the 10 minutes, because there was, though this committee seems to have a lot more questions than the CDBG commission. So, I don't know, Mike.
Very thoughtful. Well, no, I'm saying, if we give them 15 minutes to present, I would like to, if we're going to define anything, it's their presentation. Our questions, I don't, that can be open-ended, because we have to have our answers. And however long that takes is all I can
Right,
take.
and the idea of the time for the questioning was more about when should the next person show up, so they weren't sitting here.
Oh, I want them all to sit through all of this. Are you kidding me?
Well, a couple of them did the last couple of days.
I would think that they should be able to make a presentation, though, for this type of improvement in 10 minutes. Just
Would or would not, I'm sorry?
would, 10
Would be
minutes.
able to?
Sure.
Right, although I think.
I mean, at this stage of the game, they've pretty much got the information right there, and they've talked about this enough. They
Probably have a little slideshow for us and
right, exactly.
written out. And I could believe that, and then it's more important about the questioning part.
Questions, right.
Right.
So everybody gets their questions
I agree.
answered, yeah.
Right, but I mean, your point, Larry, is you like to be respectful of people's time, and so you want to give them a chance to know that they don't have to sit here for 3 hours with us. But it's our questions, I think, that take the majority of these presentation times that we.
Oh, it's not gonna be perfect, and I understand that. I mean, we had some that went pretty fast yesterday, and we were getting on the email to get the afternoon people in here a little earlier. So it's not, it's not a perfect system. I mean, this is 6, it's not 14 or 15 a day kind of thing, so, but.
All right, 10 or 15 minutes, I really don't care.
10.
I was gonna say 15.
10.
Okay.
And, yeah.
I mean, I sort of, I didn't want to cut anybody short, but I do think, as Brian was saying, that they've done this presentation, they have it together, they should. And 10 minutes probably works, and 5 or 10 minutes of questions, and you could sort of plan out a day for them.
Okay. So,
I was just, the only
10
thing I would
minutes.
say
They
15
got 10 minutes to present.
Because
I got
if
it.
they can provide,
Okay.
rather than rushing,
She has
if they
another
provide
meeting. I'm sorry.
enough detail, then maybe we don't have as many questions.
Well, we're gonna get.
But you're saying they could get it done in 10, so that's fine. You guys, you have more experience with that, so I'm gonna go, I'll go.
And I think it's important, like in CDBG, we may ask them, what would you do with less money? But when we were talking we were talking money in detail. Maybe we need to hold off on in what we might give them until we hear all of them.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
The
yeah.
only reason why I did that today was because y'all already sat through and did that. But I agree with Larry, when they're doing the presentations, you just pound through all the presentations, ask your questions pertaining them, and then we talk money afterwards.
Right,
I-
but you're always sliding a little bit one way or finishing a project here and
Yeah.
still.
I just didn't do that today because I wanted to, when they were up here, I wanted them to have some
Yeah.
finality to.
And there wasn't a situation where if we didn't use the money for that, it was gonna slide to the other guy today anyway. 'Cause
Right.
His presentation was
Right.
independent.
Yeah. Okay, anything else? All right, so, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask if, just for additional background information, just kind of like some general numbers, like how many people actually applied for these? And I mean, like how many?
For the
these-
water sewer?
Yeah. Do we know?
20,
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can find out.
it was in the 20s.
Okay, so these are the ones who came to the top. Were there ones, I mean, was there a big gap between this, I mean, what was the?
We had a whole bunch that scored 0.
Okay, and then what
They
was?
just were not eligible, right?
Right, they're not eligible, but I know that there were some that were coming in like at 40 and stuff like that. Was there a big gap between this group and then?
There,
those that
we had said the cutoff was supposed to be 70. We allowed the 69.4 because we felt it was close enough to 70, and then there was a big drop off after
After that?
69.4, yes.
Okay,
I mean, like, big gap meaning like over 10 points
okay.
I'll
lower.
tell you, when I was signing grades, if you didn't have 69.5, you didn't get it.
Yeah, well.
I'm just kidding.
Yes, Larry?
Another question that always comes up with these type of projects is, how many people does it serve?
Oh, yeah.
That's a good question, I think.
What kind of bang are you getting for your buck on it?
I like that.
5 pipes worth. Sorry. All right.
Thanks for using WebEx.
Hey,
Visit our
thanks.
website at
Okay, so we choose a date so we can
www.webex.com.
email that out.
This is next month, right?
April, yes. I guess the question is, do you want to do it before our finance or after our finance? Probably,
Depends on the week.
The
When's
nin-
our finance?
The 19th of April, I'm leaving.
The
I'm not
6th,
coming
isn't
back.
it?
Ever?
our finance is on April
Couple weeks.
6th.
That's nice. When is,
Well, I mean, it's gonna be difficult to do this, you know, when other people are having meetings here, unless we're going to compete with other committee meetings, which is an issue.
Well, so that's why I was thinking maybe going after finance of April 6th, which would be the week of April 10th, because all we have that meeting for that week is Thursday's cow.
Yeah.
I have admin services. It's on It's Wednesday. on the 13th,
What?
April 13th.
The cow's on the 13th, right?
April 13th is the cow.
Yeah.
I have admin
doesn't
services
make
on there
sense.
as the 12th. I don't know if that's
Oh,
right.
no, that should be the 5th.
Could we do it 2 weeks from today on the 29th?
You're right.
I gotta look up this meeting.
The afternoon,
What day?
Hold on 2 seconds.
The
the
29th?
29th, Wednesday?
March 29th?
Yeah,
I won't be able to attend.
And you said afternoon?
yeah. But
The 29th, yeah, it's,
what about the 5th? Wednesday the 5th?
What about the 31st?
That's right before the finance committee.
I will be out of town.
The 31st or the?
No, on the 5th.
Are you
What
gonna
about
be
the
back
Friday
on the 6th?
I
I
will be
won't-
back on the, I'm purposely flying back for finance, yes. Can you believe it?
I did it once.
I'm taking a red eye, it's
I've done
great.
it. Well, that's why I'm not leaving till the 19th.
So I will be out all of the last week of March.
That's spring break week.
It is spring break week.
Oh.
Yes.
What about April 11th?
Well, so that's why I'm looking for the week of April 10th, because that should be a clean
Yeah.
week as far as meetings go.
Yeah.
Can't be.
What can't be?
Well, I got the 4th of April as a Tuesday,
It is.
It is.
and that's the first Tuesday, so that's gotta be,
But don't go by that, because they base everything based on when the county board meeting is, and then they
Right.
roll everything backwards.
Right, April 4th is PED and Valley High. I'm fine with April 11th, to answer your question. 11th is fine for me, 12th is fine for me.
12th is,
The 12th does not work, because we're scheduled to do a Metro visit that day, that was,
Oh.
everybody was asked to go
To-
to.
Oh,
I can, the April 10th, which is Easter Monday, is the best day for me out of that week, to be
Which?
honest with you.
I'm also.
Which? I'm sorry.
April 10th,
10th.
Monday?
I could do 10.
I could make it work.
I think I could make it work.
All right.
April 10th.
At what time?
Can we do 8:30 like normal? Is that okay, or 8:15, or 8, or?
No, no, not earlier.
Not earlier.
8:30 's fine.
8:30 or
8:30.
9? 9?
Yeah, not earlier, right?
Not earlier. God.
8:30?
8:30.
Ugh.
I hear you wanting to make the meetings later. How about 1 a.m., 1 p.m.?
Well, no, listen, if you want to start late at night, I'm with you, but you have to say in the morning.
Okay, so April 10th, Monday, April 10th, special finance to go over ARPA projects, 8:30 a.m. Oh, I got PM. That would be a problem.
So,
8:30 a.m. Okay?
Typically, the CDBG meetings start with about 15 minutes just to get roll call and approve last minute's meetings or whatever. And then the interviews start like at 8:45. I don't know who's gonna be making out this agenda, but that would be a typical scenario for that.
We're just gonna start pounding through them.
Okay.
We have to do public comment, we have to do, member comment and all that, but I mean,
Great.
that takes 2 minutes.
Okay.
So we're just running. I think you just tell them that meeting starts at 8:30 and they should be here.
Okay.
We just all vow not to make member comments.
I was only thanking the committee, that was all I had to say. All right, anything else on these capital projects? No? Okay, then we are done with our agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at 12:53. Teresa, Carolyn,
there we go.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?